Good afternoon. Today is Wednesday, March 12th, 2025. We are in the City Council chamber at City Hall for our workshop meeting. Council, I will turn to you for an approval of the agenda as outlined, making note that Doug Bennett from the Washington County Water Conservancy District got held up at work. He's on his way, and so I'll ask to move those to the final items. That said, I'll ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
Made.
I have a motion by Councilman Belliston. Is there a second? Second by Councilman Ivey. All in favor?
Aye.
That is approved unanimously. We'll start off the meeting then with business licenses, short-term rentals by City Recorder Tara Pence. Are always ready, always prepared City Recorder.
I thought I'd have like 30 minutes, but it's okay to mentally prepare myself. All right. Okay, I'm just gonna kind of hit the highlights of the briefing document, and hopefully everybody had a chance to look through that. This is just specifically for short-term rentals. We've been dealing with a lot of issues the last couple of years, and this year specifically, we just, after going back and forth with a lot of things, we decided we better just update the code and see if we could get a better handle on it. So a couple of things that we're doing, the State Tax Commission asked individual municipalities to collect proof of submittals for transient room tax, because when they come into the state, they're like in a large lump sum, not broken out by municipalities, and so they are asking us to get proof of that ourselves. So we just added that into the code, so we have showing we can, and we do have it in the code to collect those. We have our local property management requirement, and I think most of you are aware of that. Our property management companies have to live within Washington County, and everyone is required to have someone. It can even be themselves, but they have to show proof that they're in Washington County. We've, over the last couple of years, had a lot of people using more of a point of contact. So it's someone who's in Washington City but are not licensed as a property management company, and they've not wanted to give us their contact information, which means we can't verify they live in Washington County, nor can we get a hold of them as part of the 24-hour response time. So we're just adding into the code that is a requirement. Whether you use a property management company or a point of contact, we need to have verification of their address and their phone numbers.
Tara, back to the transit room tax compliance. Yes. Just, can you give an example of what the proof of tax remittance might look like?
So it's a form, it's actually available to every single owner if they use Airbnb, VRBO, and if they have a property management company that submits it for them, they will give it to them. But you just go in onto that website and click the transient. There's a link that you can just click and download it themselves.
Okay.
So, and we have samples of that for them if it's their first time, but they're getting pretty familiar with it. We've been doing it for a couple of years. There's just we've had a couple of people who have not wanted to submit that. So now we're gonna have it in code, so you have to.
Okay.
Our biggest thing yes.
Well, before we move on the point of contact, the management companies have a business license. The property owners have a business license, or we ought to add in there for the points of contact.
So that was something I wanted to discuss with you guys. So you know that we do require business licenses for any business that is located in Washington City. There are some businesses that we have to verify different types of information, that if they are not in Washington City, we still make them get one. Like if they have illicit discharge or things like that, we still make them get a Washington City business license so we can show that they're doing the things that Washington City specifically requires. So most of our property management companies have a brick or mortar business in a different city. Most of them are in St. George. So they are not getting a Washington City business license. So I know that's something that I've discussed a little bit. Do we want the property management companies that are managing properties in Washington City to have a business license? And if so, I think the point of contact should have one as well. So that would be something.
I agree that they both should have it, the management company and the point of contact.
It would make it, so I'll give you an example of something I think that would be beneficial if they had one. So if we have a property management company that is not following our city code, we can, if this goes through the way that we hope it does, we can give them 30 days notice to come into compliance. If they don't come into compliance, we can revoke their business license, which means any property that they're managing in Washington City, we can contact those homeowners and say, this property management company does not have a business license in Washington City. You have 30 days to get a new one, which will incentivize that property management company to fall into compliance with Washington City ordinance, because they're part of the problem we're having with some of these things.
Do you think that it's gonna cause people to not go through the process if we make it too hard on them?
It's not hard. It's not hard at all. It's just that they don't want to follow our guidelines. So there is an international building code that says short-term rentals cannot have more than 10 people unless they have a sprinkler system. We are getting flooded with emails every day of links of units that are advertising for 15, 16, 30. We got one yesterday that was 45 people in an unsprinkled unit, 45 people, and they are only allowed 10. And I have our chief's here he can tell you more about what we're finding when we go out and do inspections, but those property management companies are telling us, we don't have any control over that. The homeowner tells us what they need to do, but this
Sarah?
code says,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I didn't want to get too far down the road from this. So I want, if you'd speak a little bit more about business licensing, just so that
Yeah.
I'm very clear. So if they have a license issued in St. George or Hurricane, they're still required to have one here. There's no standard or local agreement that would allow their license in other
for a
municipalities to work
short-term
here
rental, every single unit has to be licensed individually.
in the city where
Of
they
Washington.
reside.
Yeah, for short-term rentals are different. So every single unit, so if I owned 5 short-term rentals, I would have to get a business license on all 5 of those. Every single one of them. The property management company is different. So those, we honor those if they're located in a different city.
Okay.
Because they're
What do
not
others,
here.
what do other cities do, and what does it
So
cost to get a
It's
business license?
$50 for a
Okay,
business
that's what I
license.
thought.
So for St. George City honors nothing. So if you do business in St. George, it doesn't matter where you are, you get a business license for every single thing. Hurricane, they're more like us. They'll honor some things they don't, depending on what they are. Santa Clara, I believe they do. They don't honor everything, but they honor some. So every city is a little bit different. But like contractors, for sure, we honor because they're only required to get one in the state of Utah. There's a lot of things that like if you're a housekeeping and you reside in St. George, we're not gonna make you get another
But for
license
short-term
over-
rentals,
but
if you have a
short-term
short-term rental in St. George,
You have to get one for your
and
units
if you're a
here.
property manager that manages properties that are in St. George, you would need to get a license there? That's how they operate?
Yep. Yes,
Can I ask a question too?
yep.
I am totally on board with the fire sprinkler thing and totally on board with, the short-term rentals having to have a license, city license. Let me ask this scenario though, like what if a family from up north has, they take some savings, they buy a nightly rental. They just have a one-off nightly rental, for an investment. And say their brother-in-law lives down here and they're the point of contact and their brother-in-law cleans it, maybe.
We
It's
have
just kind
that.
of a family business like that. There's a lot of those around, I know. How does that work with the point of contact? If it's like the brother-in-law, if he's like a school teacher or something and they just kind of do this on the side, does he have to have a business license?
So currently, right now, they don't.
Okay.
They don't, I mean, technically, they're doing a business, they probably should, but they're a family member point of contact. But at the same time, if we required that, it would
Yeah.
simply be a paper you fill out, like a business license application, it's $50 a year, and it shows that they are a legitimate property management company, even if it's for one, and it shows that they're gonna follow, like, they would have to fill it out saying they're gonna follow Washington City codes.
So what documentation would they have to show that they're a legitimate business? I mean, would they
They
have
can use, if they
to?
use their name, just their first and last name, it is super simple. They just fill out our application online. Unless they're gonna full on get like an LLC and everything else, which requires something a little bit more,
Yeah,
it would
but-
take 20 minutes.
But
to
that's
get it.
not what they're requiring. They're
Yeah.
just the point of contact so we can keep in contact with you
Yeah.
and, you know, and B, that you understand that this is a short-term rental and this is what, you know, city ordinance is and this is what, you know, codes and fire codes and all that are, right?
Yeah, I'm totally on board with that. I'm just not sure if we should require every point of contact to have a business license, you know, in Washington City. Just, there's got to be a ton of them that are just
I know.
brother-in-laws or sister-in-laws.
And
that
there's a lot of them that are. I think the thing that we struggle with right now is because we have that local property management requirement, they're filling it out as they are the property management. That's what it says on the application. We know that they're just a point of contact. We know they're a family member, but they're filling it out as they are the property management and the 24-hour point of contact for that unit.
Okay.
So that's,
Are we seeing a difference? Because I kind of, like, I don't think we should require them to have a property manager. It can be just someone, like, I'm saying like like you're saying, if it's just a father or whoever's managing it for them, it doesn't have to be like an LLC, in my opinion, as long as, our goal is just to have someone that you can get a hold of if there's a
and
problem.
that's what we require right now. It's just someone they can
Yeah,
get
I
a hold of.
agree with that. I just don't want to kick it up a notch on small little operations, you know. I agree if it's an actual property management company, yeah, you know, they need to be licensed and insured and all that kind of stuff, but, so,
Tara, start back with that first sentence on your second bullet. Having a local property manager as part of our existing code. So every short-term rental in Washington City is required
Yes,
to have a property manager that operates within Washington County.
yes.
Now talk to us, to the councilman's questions, talk to us about this point of contact issue, and then maybe we can circle back to business licenses like Councilman Bellison was asking about.
So at one point, the council, when we have the overlay for a subdivision, the council had directed that whoever the developer was, they had to have a singular property management company for the entire subdivision. So they would have to direct, like every single person would have to use that property management company and did not have a choice. Later, as it went on, the property management companies, as well as the homeowners, felt that that was unfair, that they were being dictated who they had to use. So we changed it so it would be Washington County, and it was essentially for having someone we know is local, that if the police department has a problem with that unit, we can call someone and they can be there within 20 to 30 minutes.
So every short-term rental should have a property management company in the
Yes.
county.
Yes.
Well, or point of
Oh,
contact.
like, we've never actually in the code said it's a point of contact, so that's why in this.
And that's where
code
I'm trying to
saying
draw the line, because it says having a local property manager as part of our existing code.
It is,
Manager could be anybody. It's more of just
Or,
a contact.
so a business or a point of contact. So where do you draw the line on who has
That's-
a business license and
Yep.
where?
That's
Is
why-
that the question?
yeah, so that's why in this code that we did, we're actually saying, we actually included, if you look at it, it says point of contact. If you guys would like to change it to that, but we still have to collect address, phone number, because like you said, some of them are, this is my brother, he lives down here, he doesn't want to give you his address. Well, sorry, it's only for our records, and the only people that can access it is us, but we still need to have the address and phone number so we can verify they're in Washington County and the police department can get a hold of them.
the change that you're proposing, I mean, I like it a lot.
You know, and there was a reason, if you go back to the lay of the land back when that provision was put in, to have one property manager, we needed it. Because at the time, it was new to us, it was getting started, and I understand the pushback. But this, to me, seems like a step in the right direction. I like the idea, as long as that point of contact is verifiable, their phone number, their address, so they can be contacted. Because ultimately, that could have some licensing impact if they're not available and aren't responsive to our concerns, correct? So it's-
Otherwise, it puts a lot of burden on the police.
Yeah.
And rather than putting that burden upon the, the point of contact or the property management
Because
company.
probably 90% at least of our short-term rentals are not owned by people that live here. They're
Yeah.
all out of town. So they can't be responsive in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So the only thing that's my question on the licensing, like how do we differentiate between saying, do we want our property management companies, even if they're not in Washington City, to be licensed?
Council, thoughts on
Yeah,
that? I think that's
would
really
be
the question.
that would be
Councilman
my
Bellison?
question.
and I talked to you, Mayor, a few weeks ago about trying to get this on the agenda. The challenge is with the vacation rentals, and I live in a vacation rental neighborhood. I own a couple of them. When you have companies that are out there clearly violating or clearly advertising in violation of a fire code, and then you guys got copies of some emails that were sent where they send out and tell their people, hey, we need to do X, Y, and Z while we get our inspection so that we can renew your business license, but then we're gonna go back to advertising, in clear violation of a fire code. Like, they're knowingly violating, not only ordinance, but fire codes, which is a safety issue, right? So, the one that Tara mentioned at 45 people that they're advertising is around the corner from my house. And it's not fire sprinkled. And it is managed by a local property management company. So, I mean, I'm in favor of them having a business license to go through the business licensing that says, hey, are you aware of the code? Check the block. Are you aware of the fire code? Check the block. And then get their business license, and then that way it's a little bit more documentation that they've been notified, so that when it does come down and say, okay, you're violating a fire code, you're violating health, safety, and welfare of the people that you're advertising to, okay, we're gonna fine you, and here's why that you're getting fined. It's another layer of documentation that says, hey, guys, you're not just a point of contact, you're running a business with that house, and that's fine, but when you're advertising in violation of fire codes, I just think that goes against the spirit of what we should be allowing,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
It
Further
is,
thoughts on that?
it is a problem. I mean, we have spent hours on the phone with property management companies, and their response is, well, we're just doing what the homeowners want us to do. But also, they should have a responsibility because they're the ones that are picking up the maximum occupancy signs. They know what we require here. So they're just pushing it on to their homeowners. So there is an issue. There's clearly an issue. But and I don't know how far we can push a penalty on a property management company that doesn't have a business license here. We can try. It's gonna fall on the homeowners at the end of the day. But if we have some kind of teeth for the property management companies to follow our code, I think it would be helpful. But
Feedback, council, on this topic?
I think the thing that we need to remember is that the second homes provide a second home for, hundreds, maybe a few thousand, but it's a primary home for tens of thousands that live here. And we need to remember that, I think, in all of these decisions we make. Because I think, and we've learned a lot over the years on the overnight rental issue. I think, to me personally, this again is a step in the right direction. I think that if they're not willing to provide the information, then I haven't read in here where if they don't, this is my question, if they don't provide the information you ask, are we going to deny their application, or would we still have to give it even without receiving that information?
which part, like
Their contact information that you said some people don't like to
we
give.
will not pass it through if they don't provide it.
Okay.
We just, because we can't verify anything.
Yeah, that was my question, okay.
So right now, I don't believe that we're asking for property management companies to have a business license in Washington.
We
But
have
this
not.
is feedback that I
Yes.
think the council needs to consider. Is that fair right now where we are, council, that this is feedback that we ought to consider?
So would the business license for property managers be just for short-term rentals, or would it also extend to long-term rentals for property managers?
It would just be a property management business license. So we would just have part of it, as you understand what our codes are in Washington City, you're gonna comply with them. We would have specific language for our short-term rentals. They're already managing both long and short-term in Washington City. They already are. But we don't have a renter dwellers code like St. George does for long-term rentals. Ours is specifically the short-term rentals we're looking for.
So if a property management company that does not do short-term rentals, and there's a lot of them that don't,
Right.
they wouldn't need a Washington City license. So it just is specifically to short-term
yes.
rentals.
If the council felt that it was appropriate to ask property managers who are managing properties in Washington but don't have a business license in Washington to get one. Would you see that as part of this code amendment that you're bringing forward, or would you see that as a separate code amendment?
No, I could just put it in here when I bring it back.
Council, are you prepared to discuss this particular point
I think
more
it-
tonight?
I think it seems reasonable to have the property managements who have short-term rentals here to have a license within Washington City so they can look at the, as Bellison was saying, if they look at the code and what's required of them, and because I'm sure every city has different requirements that they have to follow, so I feel like it's a reasonable ask, especially because it does has an impact on our residents and, and also the police, it could have an impact on them too. So I feel like it's reasonable.
Further thoughts on this?
Just a question on how you came up with the penalty.
So we called a bunch of other cities and counties and was trying to come up with something. It has to be significant enough that it makes them want to follow it. Because if you just say, you're gonna get penalized $100 a day for every time you violate, they don't care, because they are getting enough money that that's nothing to them. So a lot of them are doing a lot higher.
But who gets the fee? Is it the owner or is it the property manager? Because
So it can be both.
it says any owner,
It can be both. So that's why we're saying with the property management, and I think I'd like to go a little bit different direction with them. Like, I want to give them 30 days to come into compliance with what they're advertising, and then their license just gets revoked. But the homeowner is $750 a day after we notify them.
So what's the penalty if the property manager's business license gets revoked?
They
and then
have,
just
every
keep-
single unit in Washington City has to find a new property management company, because we can notify them
I
and
know you
say,
say that, but what if they don't care and keep just running their
it would
business,
be the
right?
same $750 a day, because that's how we have it wrote right
So,
now.
how do we even get pulled? Like, I don't know how you actually get it out of them then. Is it like leaned against their house or?
It goes through the same process as any civil citation.
Okay.
Justice court, essentially, we could end up leaning, or it goes that far, so.
Okay, but it follows the justice course.
The goal is that everyone comes into compliance and we never have to use this fine. That's what I would love to happen. Like, you see this and because right now we're getting people like, what's my fine? What's my penalty? If you revoke my license, what are you gonna do to me? Like, we have the tools to do stuff, but we don't have anything in place to actually make it happen.
That's a good point, Tara, because this year in the legislature, they passed HB, I think it was 256, that allows municipalities to use offerings on websites for enforcement now, and they didn't do that originally. And I think because of all this, the way this has evolved, I think that's important that we have a means to find out, but now we need a fine to make sure that it's substantiated so that we'll come into compliance and stay in compliance.
I think it's really important to emphasize what Tara said. We hope that we don't collect any money. This is not a revenue source for the city. We want people to come into compliance, collect any money at all, so.
My question stemmed from, is it high enough to make it, to make them do it? Because I agree, if it's a small amount, they're not going to, they'll just pay the fine and move on, right? It all depends on how much money. I mean, if they're bringing in that kind of money, $750 might not be enough and they just pay it.
Perspective, owning a couple of vacation rentals in Washington City and hiring a vacation rental management company. The company that I've hired says, great, we love this because, we're trying to do the right thing. And my attitude is, I'm trying to do the right thing, but I got somebody right next door to me that is advertising the 20 plus and it's not sprinkled, and they're violating fire codes, and they're, creating issues, and we've got no point of contact to call them up and say, hey, your folks are out here at 2:00 in the morning, acting ridiculous. And so, I'm happy about it.
So
I think $150 is enough, though, to get attention. And if
I
it's
mean-
not, we'll come back and ask for more.
And
but I
it's
think plenty.
$750 a day. So we'd give them contact them and say, this is what we found. You have 30 days to be in compliance. I feel like giving anybody 30 days to come into compliance is reasonable. I mean, and maybe it's too reasonable, but I feel like we still want to be good people to work with at Washington City. So we give them 30 days to come into compliance, and then just every single day that they aren't, it's $750 per day. And the nice thing about the way we wrote this is it's a civil citation. So myself or Hannah can write out, we can actually give them the citation. We don't have to get the police department involved. We can do it ourselves for every single day.
You say the most common problem with the rentals is the capacity over 10 for the sprinklers plus the contact information, or those
Are
probably your
my,
two most common
those are probably my two
problems?
most common. We have a lot that are just will not get a license, but I think, and Jordan has a little more information, I think the way the legislature has wrote the new code, that will give us some teeth to do that too. So if they don't have a license, we can actually go in on, if you want to tell them how to do it, but I think we can go in on the VRBO and Airbnb websites and stop that too, but we could actually go after them that way too.
I think it's fair to say in this, if somebody's advertising Sleeps 10 and 15 people show up, there's no penalty for the property owner because your
Yeah.
tenant came in and violated a fire code. This is where they're advertising and knowingly and intentionally trying to bring people in and violate, a safety code, so.
So I'm in favor of it. I like it. So, yeah.
Council, what I'm generally hearing is that we like the code amendments that the recorders brought forward, and we'd like the addition of property managers being licensed in Washington if they're managing properties here. Is that generally,
I think it's reasonable.
Tara, are you comfortable with that?
Yep. Yes.
Council, if you feel good about that, I'm happy to hear more discussion. Otherwise, what I'd ask you to do, Tara, is make those edits
Yep.
and bring this back in the regular meeting on March 26th. And then if you have anything else, and then I'd also think we ought to hear from Jordan on what he's prepared.
Perfect. Yep, that's perfect. Thank you so much.
sound okay?
I appreciate your time.
The impetus behind HB 256, Representative Walter noticed the whole state was talking about housing policy, and this was his quickest way to get new inventory to market without building or entitling additional units. So he came up with this bill. The meat of the bill is on page 3. And that's the sections that I'll focus on. Section 3 there on line 61. So if we regulate short-term rentals, says that we can use a listing or offering on a short-term rental website as evidence that a short-term rental took place so long as the municipality has additional information to support the position that an owner or leasee violated a municipal ordinance. So we can only use the websites if we have additional information. And I asked Representative Walters today what that means. He says if they fail to get a business license, that's additional information, or a complaint is launched by a neighbor, that's additional information. If they fail to get a license or we receive a complaint from a neighbor, we can then go on Airbnb or VRBO to search for the listing that is operating illegally. If that listing does indeed exist and they're either not in the correct zone, they're not licensed, or they're violating our city ordinances, we can then request that those websites remove those listings.
And I would just add, the legislation doesn't limit the city's ability to develop other information. And so even though the representative told Jordan that, the law doesn't say that. So for example, let's say that we were there doing a sidewalk inspection, and the sidewalk inspector found a short-term rental agreement between the owner and a tenant. He could use that as well, right? And so that's just an odd example, but the city could develop other sources of information as a probable cause basis, which would then allow us to use the listing as we sought to prosecute.
And the original version of the bill would require the website to remove the listing. They're no longer required to, because the websites, Airbnb, VRBO, they threw a fit and they were hiring lobbyists to stop this legislation. However, Representative Walter said they have promised that if we request that they remove a listing, that they will. If they do not, he wants us to document all of those cases where those listings are not removed. They will come back next year with a follow-up bill to solve that problem. But this gives us some tools and some teeth that we can revoke a business license if they're outside of the zone or they're not operating illegally. that we can request that that listing be removed. The impetus, like I said, behind this was to take those units, get them in the long-term housing market to help with our housing crisis, but in so doing, it gives us tools to better enforce our city code.
Jordan, would you just talk about line 66 as well while you're right there? That goes back to what we were just talking about.
Yes, municipality may adopt an ordinance requiring the owner of a short-term rental to obtain a business license. So what Representative Walter didn't want to do was get in the way of us municipalities regulating in a way that we see fits best for our city and our residents. So we can indeed request that they get a license, and if they fail to do so, we can ask that the listing be removed from the website.
Great work. Thank you, Tara. Thank you, Jordan. That concludes item 4. We'll move on to item 5, which is wastewater user rates. Then we'll circle back to items 2 and 3. On item 5, Public Works Assistant Director Lester Dalton, affectionately called our resident rock star. It's the main event. Take it away.
Mayor, I thought you took that title away.
I did. And
Okay.
she is still the reigning, but you're right there.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Hope everybody had an opportunity to review the riveting information that I provided you with related to the sewer system. This is a discussion about our current sewer rate and the need for the increase. One item that kind of stands out with this is we've got a little bit of a change that we're proposing associated with the lift station fees that we currently charge. These fees were put in place decades ago. It's been, I believe, the first fee was implemented when Ridge Point was originally constructed. And it followed through into Coral Canyon, and it's been an additional fee above and beyond the standard sewer rates. That's the major change that we're proposing, is to kind of absorb that fee in as the sewer system as a whole, because to date we've got 6 lift stations now, and it's getting really cumbersome to try and keep track of things and be able to document what them additional costs are and only apply them to certain groups. Currently, we've got in excess of 3,300 customers that are being charged that fee. That's the major change that's being proposed. We are proposing an increase. Percentage-wise, it looks pretty significant. It's about a 10.5% increase. But the reality is, on the collections portion of the sewer rates, which Washington City keeps, it's slightly over $1 per customer is what the increase would be. We've also proposed a step-up increase that matches a percentage per year that would just happen automatically. All of these fees are proposed not to be implemented until July 1. That's how we've done all the cash flow analysis, everything. It'll kind of help keep things pretty clean for the budget as well. I've got Aaron Anderson with Bone & Collins here to kind of give you a presentation, take you through the nuts and bolts of this, and give you some explanation as to where we're at with needs within the sewer system.
Thanks, Lester.
With
Come on
that,
up, Aaron.
I'll turn this over to Aaron.
Good evening, Council. Good to see you all again. It's been a couple weeks since we last talked about stuff like this, but today we're talking about sewer user rates. And so again, if you have questions as we go through this, please stop me and just go ahead and pose those questions as we go. So, here we go. So just as a quick overview of, really the rate making process really boils down to some pretty simple principles of balancing revenue and expenses. We look at how much does it cost the city to run their sewer system, looking at the different components. You have some of your more fixed costs, which are tied up in your O&M, things like that. You have capital expenses, and then we have some recommendations with respect to system renewal, meaning that there's money coming in that can be then reinvested back in the system to replace pipes that are in a state of disrepair to keep the system up to date. And hopefully to avoid a scenario where the system is in a state of disrepair and you don't have the funds in place to bring it back up to where it should be. Again, we look at we talked previously about our master plan and our impact fee facilities plan are really what leads up to this kind of culminating study in the rates, is we have to have all those pieces in place to know what capital projects are on the docket, what are our recommended R&R budget, and then once we have all those pieces, we can calculate our rates. And so it's a culmination of all those things coming together. In terms of our system budgets, we're looking at a number of different things. Again, like I mentioned, first off, we look at your O&M budget. And this is based on looking at some of your historical data, and then we forecast that out based on an assumed inflation rate. So we have budget data from fiscal year 2024 that we use to identify what is your current O&M budget, and that is then forecasted out into the future at an assumed inflation rate. That's 3%, as you can see in the study. And then as your system continues to grow, your rate paying base also grows with that. As you add more users, there's also more money coming in by virtue of just having more people that are paying rates into the system. We look at the capital expenditures, and this is again based on the master plan findings. There's about just over $14 million worth of capital projects that are within the next 10 years for the city. And we also have, as we discussed during the master plan phase of this whole analysis, a recommended rehabilitation and replacement budget of a number starting out at $500,000 per year, and that's increasing gradually over the next several years until we hit a $1.1 million annual investment budget by the year 2032. If you remember, that $1.1 million number was what we recommended to be at essentially right now. So we're phasing into it as opposed to just one big punch to go to that number. We're phasing into that over time. So it's not having a huge impact on rates right now. So it's just a transition to that recommended level of funding. As far as our overall rate model goes, our target is that we're trying to maintain a reserve fund of at least 12 months of O&M. We don't ever want to dip below having 12 months O&M in the bank, essentially. That way you're maintaining some money in the bank or in the reserve account for rainy days. So we're trying to not drop below that 12-month or one full year of O&M costs. And then typically, a lot of times working with cities, there's debt service to account for. Fortunately for Washington City, there's no debt service that we're having to worry about here. So it does kind of help. Whenever you bring debt on, it does obviously cost more. You're paying interest for borrowing money. So kudos for not having any sewer bonds you're paying off. And then again, it goes back to balancing our cash flow. So let's go ahead and jump. Sorry, I keep hitting the wrong button here. So this chart right here demonstrates if we were to make no rate adjustments to just your current rate structure. There's two lines there. I guess there's four lines to keep in mind. There's the dash lines, which kind of are running through the middle of the chart, which represent your 12-month and 18-month reserve balance targets. And then you have the orange line, which represents basically your sewer reserve fund, and the blue line is your impact fee fund or your restricted fund balance. With no rate changes, we would anticipate that reserve fund balance would slowly just taper off until it basically hit zero by the year 2031. And so it's our opinion that the current rate structure is not adequate to maintain the financial needs of the city and the sewer fund going forward. And so we do have recommendations to modify that. This next chart demonstrates what that reserve fund balance would look like based on the recommended rates that we have in the report. Again, we do anticipate that at the end of, or at the beginning of your fiscal year 2025, there was a reserve fund balance of just under $5 million. That will still be hit fairly hard here in the next few years as you fund capital projects. But based on our recommended rates, we would not drop down. We're right in line with that 12-month O&M maintenance there. So we're not dropping below that. And then it would rebound over time to where we're essentially getting close to back to where we started, hopefully just keeping you cash flow neutral over time, not to where it's rising too much or it's dropping too much. So this is our recommended approach with our rates. This chart just depicts, again, the different components of the rate analysis. With capital projects, again, there's no debt service, so there's no yellow in there. Again, this is different components, with the red being the R&R, again, capital expenses, and those different components. Let's go on to maybe the meat of this. So the existing rate structure, again, as Lester kind of hinted at, is you have different components. Now, Washington City assesses a collection rate because you don't treat your own wastewater. There is a component of this that's charged by St. George City because they take and treat your wastewater. The current rate structure, again, has all of your single-family residential connections, they default to 1 ERU, and that rate right now is $10.22. There is, as Lester said, there is a $5.03 premium on that rate if you're in the sewer lift station areas. And I'll just kind of second what Lester has said. I feel like it's a good idea for the city to kind of normalize those rates across the system. For one, you always have some level of disparity within a system on how much it costs to treat a user. For instance, someone who lives right next to the outfall in St. George may only use like 50 feet of pipe, as opposed to someone who's living way out in Long Valley or wherever it may be that uses a lot of pipe. And you don't charge the user who's right next to St. George less than you charge the user who's far away. And so it makes a lot of sense to normalize that because, again, it's one service area and it's good to have just one consistent rate to where you're not having to chase down and keep track of, okay, who's behind a lift station, who's not. It just adds some burden to the city that we don't feel like is necessary. So again, there is that proposed change. And so the current total rate right now for non-lift station service, the non-lift station service area is that $24.37. And if someone is serviced by a lift station, that's that $5 increase, $29.40. Our proposed rate structure, again, has that one change where we're proposing or recommending that you normalize it across the board. You would maintain the same 6,000 gallon per month threshold as what an ERU utilizes. So when you're calculating a rate for a non-standard user, you would look at that winter water use, and if their water use is 12,000 gallons per month, that's 2 ERUs, so on and so forth. So that's how you would calculate the rate for a non-standard user like a restaurant or a business, someone that's not a single-family residential home. And again, we recommend that you change that lift station rate so it's one consistent rate. So that is the summary of what we're recommending. And this is where we have essentially our summary of our recommended rate increases. The current rate at the 1022, there is a 10.5% recommended bump here in the early on, which is about $1 per month we recommend, followed by pretty moderate rate increases into the future where you're just maintaining and keeping up with increasing costs due to inflation. So we feel like this is a pretty reasonable rate schedule to propose. I'll say sometimes we see rate recommendations that are way more aggressive than this. So I applaud the city for being in pretty good shape. We just have a little bit of fine tuning to recommend there to bring it to where we feel like you're going to be financially stable for the next 5 to 10 years. And again, this is something you'll look at again in 4 to 5 years, and you'll course correct as you see if certain assumptions don't match what we assume, then you course correct at that point in time. So that is here's just a rate comparison. Sorry, one more slide I forgot about. This will compare the proposed rate with other users in the area. Again, your rate would be a little bit more expensive than St. George City, but you're pretty much on par with other communities in the area. In fact, you're on the lower end of what that rate would be for sewer service in Washington County. So with that, I'm open for questions or
I got a couple. So an
Sure.
ERU is 8,000 gallons.
6,000.
6,000.
6,000, yes.
Is it different for sewer than other?
So the 6,000 gallons was consistent with what we looked at in terms of kind of that winter water use. That was right, pretty close. That's the current way the city looks at it, is 6,000 gallons. And we used recent data to kind of confirm that a 6,000 gallon threshold was still reasonable based on current data.
Okay, so 6,000 gallons per ERU, but if somebody uses 12,000 gallons, they're going to get charged that rate for the 12,000 gallons.
Not a single family home. So a single family home, if you use more than that, you're still just charged the 1 ERU. This would apply to a non-standard user like an apartment complex that has one, maybe a master meter. If it's a restaurant or a Walmart, someone comes in, that's how you calculate their sewer rate. But for a single family user, they're just assessed the 1 ERU regardless of their water use. You're not checking their water use for a typical single family home.
Okay.
That makes sense?
It does. In the other exhibit, the city's looking for an impact fee per ERU of $1135.42. What's our current rate?
Current impact fee, $980, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's going up $250.
It's going up like $150, I think,
I'm
roughly.
bad at math.
It's okay. Yeah, in that ballpark.
Huh? I did go to Pineview, yeah. Okay, but it's still, for in the impact fee, the single-family home would be that $1135.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Jeremy, did you have a comment?
Yeah, my comment is, I really appreciate the way that they've structured that rate change. It's really nice because I think it helps our residents absorb that change. Otherwise, we're only doing it every time we do a study, and what happens is our money goes down, and then we hit them with a really big increase. So I really appreciate that. I think it's better for us, it's better for the residents to have those small stepped-up increases rather than once every 5 years, we really hammer everybody again. So I really like the way they've done that. We've done that with some other of our rate structures, and it's a really good, so appreciate that.
Further feedback, questions for Aaron? So we have the impact fee, facilities plan, and fee analysis tonight.
Correct.
You're wanting to come back in a few weeks with the rate. So you're back to back to back.
We'll be back again in a couple weeks, yep.
Okay. Council, anything else for Aaron or Lester? Otherwise, we'll see this rate on our next meeting on March 26th.
So just to clarify, tonight in the regular meeting is the impact fee study that we talked about 2 weeks ago.
Right.
Correct.
Next week will be, in the regular meeting, will be this that we're talking about tonight.
Yep.
Just to really
Correct.
confuse us, that's how we're doing
Yeah,
it.
today at 6 would be the actual impact fee hearing required by state code, and then next week would be the rate hearing or equivalent, rate adoption meeting. From what I understand, that's my impression.
That's right.
Okay.
Thanks, Aaron.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks, Lester. All right, we'll move on to item number 2. This is the presentation of the draft ultra water efficient community standards. We'd like to welcome our Washington County Water Conservancy District Conservation Manager, Doug Bennett. And as I set the table just a little bit for you and we get your slides loaded, I'll just remind the council that, and I'm sure you're going to say this, I don't want to steal your thunder, but these are voluntary efficient standards in exchange for impact fee reduction. And this is a draft that I wanted to get in front of the council for feedback on this. But at the end of the day, I want to just remind everyone that this would be something that a developer would choose to implement if they want to. Doug.
Good evening, Mayor Staley, members of the council. Thank you for inviting me this evening. Sorry I wasn't here when the meeting launched. I apologize for that. The objectives of this program are to encourage new single-family homes that'll use about 1/3 less water than our current standard. Our current standard is 0.59 acre-feet of supply. So you're looking at homes that use just a little less than 180,000 gallons of water at that standard. These are homes that we're expecting will come in just under 100,000 gallons of water use per year. This is, as Mayor Staley pointed out, it's an absolutely voluntary program. I'm not asking you to change any codes or anything else. This is a program that builders would choose to bring into your development process, and of course, they'd go through your normal development process, subject to all the same scrutiny of whatever standards your city puts in place. We tried to come up with something that was adaptable to varying lot sizes. So we foresee that there's going to be a lot more smaller lot development. And that's going to happen for several reasons. The cost of development is going up. The price of housing is going up. We obviously need to see more attainable housing in the community. So we think the lot sizes are going to come down. But we also need to be adaptable so that we can have large lot development that has small demands, because the district itself is seeing development in the unincorporated county. And some of those developments are asking the district to serve them. And obviously, if somebody moves onto an acre of land in Leeds, that's going to be a real challenge if they want to landscape everything. And so we think this will come into play there. And the value for the home builder is reduced impact fees. So we're in the midst, just as you're considering your impact fees for sewer, we're in the midst of reevaluating water impact fees. Coincidentally, Bowen Collins is also working on that project right now. And there's obviously potential that impact fees will be going up, which makes it even more challenging to bring attainable housing to market. So this is one option that we can have potentially a smaller impact fee per house. It's important, as it has been with everything else that we've done, that we're not just putting stuff on paper and hoping it works, but we have some means of ensuring performance. So we're envisioning that this will come in as an entire community or a subdivision proposal where they're going to build all ultra water efficient homes. So we're asking that you come in with a proposal that would include implementation of a homeowners association, and that homeowners association would integrate the requirements of this program into their bylaws or CCRs as appropriate. And that would help us be able to enforce, because the homeowners association is looking out for those things as well. We'd probably have a supplemental agreement between the district and the HOA that would prescribe what do we do if the homeowners association is turning a blind eye to things? How do we work with each other to ensure that the standards are being upheld? And then we'd also like to see that these households be subject to the 8,000 gallon per month surcharge threshold. So we already apply that only during the winter months to all new homes, but where you have homes that are being supplied with secondary water, that's also the threshold at which the surcharge would kick in. One reason we selected that is it's very close to what we see summer demand being for these households, but it is also consistent with what you've already programmed in your billing system. So we're not trying to create your billing people would say, here's another thing I have to figure out. And so we think we'd just be able to apply an existing programming to some of these homes as well. That's why that was selected. So what happens indoors? Boy, the last time I was here talking to you guys, I think I used this same image when I spoke to you about new development standards. Pretty much everything's the same inside of the house. Be water efficient fixtures. One thing we're looking for, though, is that we want to discourage the use of salt-based water softeners. We want to do that for two reasons. The salt-based water softener has a recharge cycle that uses water, and they can increase the demand of the household. But as you know, we're going to be recycling an awful lot more water. And then other than Potempe Springs, which puts a lot of salt into our system, in the wastewater stream, salt-based water softeners are the primary driver. And there are certain times of night where cities that actually recycle all of their water will actually bypass some of their wastewater and not recycle it because it's so laden with salt. And a lot of these systems will discharge like between 2 and 4 in the morning when they think nobody's using water. So you get this big slug of salt coming down the wastewater system, collection system. So we're not looking in people's garages. We just don't want the developers to be partnering or offering a special package for a water softener and things like that. The only way we're going to get this kind of performance is for people not to have private lawns. I actually live in a home that's lawnless. If any of you went on the parade of homes, you probably saw an awful lot of homes that didn't have living grass in them. And there's a move in that direction. So you certainly can have recreational areas and so forth. What we want to see is not more than 2,000 square feet of drip irrigated landscaping on the property. And one way that we make this adaptable to small lot and large lot, if you're building on small lot, there's probably only 2,000 square feet or less that you can even put plants into. If you're building on large lot, we're envisioning something like you might see out in Kayenta, where you have a home and then you have a landscaped envelope around the exterior of that home, and then you would have native vegetation on the rest of the lot, whatever size it may be. Right now, everything you're looking at, as the mayor pointed out, is draft, and we have a meeting our second meeting with the Southern Utah Home Builders to discuss what we've already presented to them and get some more of their feedback from their members and their executive board.
Before you go
Yes.
on, can I ask, how do you calculate the 2,000 square feet? Because some places will say it's general area, and some places will say, well, it's, each plant's going to be, 3 square feet, 5 square feet, 10 square feet.
Yeah,
You calculate it that
2,000
way.
square feet is the landscaped area. The density of the plant material you can squeeze into it is going to be up to you. What I did was I modeled, using a model, we were able to put 2,000 square feet of landscape in with moderate drip irrigated plant material and be able to come up with a home that would meet the target that we were shooting to which is approximately 0.39 acre feet per household. So it's based on a model, and it's also based upon people having reasonably good irrigation management. And we can model other concepts if new ideas come up.
You know,
Another,
can I just make a
Oh, yes.
comment? Something that's
Councilman.
interesting is, so I build houses and I don't think we've put any real grass in a house for like my last 12 houses, maybe. It's all turf and, you know, which is nice. It's great for water conservation, but it's interesting that people just aren't, I think they've kind of turned towards water conservation, you know, people are buying into it and liking the idea of not having to mow their lawn all the time, and so, I mean, pretty. Yeah, exactly.
That's
Yeah,
another
so,
reason.
I mean, it's.
and it
it's
looks the
really-
same 365 days of the year, right?
Yeah, so, anyway.
But we are going to talk about recreational areas for kids, because
Yeah.
in some cases, artificial turf isn't the right choice. So we're
Yeah.
going to talk about that in a moment. We also know that putting in a typical residential swimming pool, they're typically about 400 to 425 square feet of surface area, and they'll drive up water demand by about 20 to 25,000 gallons per year. If you're trying to come in at 100,000 gallons of total demand, putting a swimming pool in the yard just wrecks the plan for all practical purposes. We'll talk more, though, about aquatic recreation in these neighborhoods. So freestanding spas would be allowed. They'd be required to have a permanent cover. Ornamental water features, which are already part of our standards, would still be allowed up to 25 square feet. And we would ask that spas and water features not be plumbed directly to the system. So you wouldn't have an autofill valve on your spa. I just met, some of you may know who Mark Eddington is, the reporter. I met with him today talking about the drought. And he said, yeah, my spa was leaking. I have to keep adding water to it. And I explained to him, if you had an autofill valve, you wouldn't even know, right? He doesn't even know where it's leaking at. So it's a way to save water because people can add water, but they're conscious of having to add water as it evaporates or is lost from a leak. So now we talk about active recreation areas. We want parks. I know you want parks. And in some cases, you may require a large development to put in municipal scale parks. But depending on the scale of the development, we're saying if there are 30 homes, they can build some kind of a recreational area that has 3,000 square feet of lawn. And for each additional home, they can add 50 square feet of lawn to that park area. And for every square foot allocated to lawn, they also get another square foot allocated to other styles of landscaping. So if you've got 30 homes, you've got 6,000 square feet of common area, of which 50% of that is going to be grass. And then community water play. I think one of the things that we need to be looking at, and particularly in a time of drought, is this study wasn't done in Washington County, but one of the studies that I was engaged with on home swimming pools found that the average person that responded to a survey that we issued was using their swimming pool 11 times per year. And in most cases, there were 3 people in the home. So you got 150 square feet of surface area per person. And I can tell you, they're out there fishing bugs out a lot more than they're fishing kids out and doing, playing around. So most families have very active periods where they're using the pool all the time. As the family ages, sometimes it just almost gets to the point of being ornamental in some cases. What we'd like to see is encouragement and maybe even incentives for communities to build a pool for the community, an HOA scale facility. So I can walk down the street, I can take the kids swimming, it doesn't have to be in my backyard. That's a great amenity. If I'm living in a small lot development, I may not even have the option of having my own swimming pool. There may not be any space. It's still gonna be a builder's decision if they're gonna build something like this, but we'd like to see builders to be encouraged to put these park and play areas and these water recreation areas into their development. And again, we have a formula that we're proposing. And I know you might be looking at each additional home, 10 additional square feet, and you're like, that doesn't seem like much. Just for comparison, a resort hotel has 5 square feet of, a Las Vegas scale resort hotel has 5 square feet of swimming pool area per guest room. Because you're obviously assuming not all the guests are coming to the pool at one time, right? At any given time. So it's probably a bigger allocation than you might imagine. The ornamental common areas that may be around the exterior, on entryways, wherever else, these would just comply with the standards of the city. We have every expectation. I mean, Washington City is one of the leaders in water conservation. I don't envision that there's going to be turf grass in any of the common area landscaping and the ornamental landscaping. They'll build that to standard. They'll put in the vegetation the city requires, and it will be completely separate from anything else that was scaled in the program. So the city would be able to dictate what that vegetation and irrigated area would look like. These are some performance estimates. So you saw me say, and this is from the model that we created. So you see the blue bars are what we would expect good, well-managed performance from a 2020 home. So just 5 years ago, you would have seen homes that were using peak summer about 30,000 gallons of water in a single month. Our new standard is the red bars, so the 0.59 standard or a 2023 and later home. We would get that down, peak demands down to around 20,000 gallons. And if you look at the ultra water efficient home, the green bars, you see that they're not even touching the 10,000 gallon line. And this model again was based on it's based on Washington County's average occupants per household. Keep in mind, if you have 7 people in your family, that's above average. You're gonna get, your bars are gonna look bigger just from the indoor use. We did this with whatever the census value was for Washington County people per dwelling unit. So it was somewhere just shy of 3 people per household. In fact, I think in this model, obviously, nobody has 2.85 people in their household, right? I believe in this model, I put 3 people into the home in every circumstance.
The green bars there, is that at a 0.39 per acre
That is
feet of water?
0.39 acre feet of supply, and it's important that people realize it's not 0.39 acre feet of use at the home, it's 0.39 acre feet of water supply at the source. Obviously, not all of the supply is going to be able to reach our customers. Some of the supply is lost in delivery through leaks and other consequences. So we expect these homes will use about 96,000 gallons. If you do the math, those of you who know what's in an acre foot, well, you'll find 96,000 gallons is not 0.39 acre feet because there's a 15% overhead on getting water, for example, from Kolob Reservoir all the way to a user down here in the urban area. The other good thing about this that I think is helpful to affordability is a lot of people are getting into a home where they're just like up to here on being able to get in there and afford it. And then you've got window coverings, you've got all these other things going on. If you look at the projected bills, this model also includes water bills for every city and water rates for every city in the region. So we can model the water bills. The ultra water efficient home is going to be spending less than $400 per year on water versus what we built 5 years ago, which was approaching $700 per year. So it's putting a little more money into their pockets as discretionary income to figure out whether they want to put that toward the mortgage or be able to buy the window coverings or buy food, shoes, clothes, whatever it may be. So that efficiency translates into real water savings for them. This is a rendering, but it was just, what an efficient home might look like without turf grass in the yard, smaller, higher density. And again, all of that would be coming from a developer as a proposal through your system.
Yeah, Doug, I appreciate this information. I think that's the trend we're seeing anyways in a lot of our new developments is a water efficient, more housing. But I think the thing that, and I'd have to go back to your number, do the math and do a math a little better, but 6,000 square foot for a park is not enough for a playable area. So that would be my only comment, and maybe it was quick, so I didn't have time to think about it. But I hoped we're not limiting them to a park size in the discussion, because what I'd hate is a developer say, well, I only have to put in 6,000 square foot, and then it kind of becomes unusable in itself.
They're actually not even obligated to put the those facilities in. I mean, they could be required. What we're doing is trying to encourage them. But as the scale of the neighborhood went up, I mean, a lot of subdivisions that you may be approached with may be in the hundreds or thousands of homes, right, eventually.
Yeah.
And so obviously it scales up with each additional home to where you're getting a bigger and bigger park. But the metrics in it are certainly open to discussion. I mean, if we say we want it to be, if we want to change some of those metrics, or you want to create something that if you even have 10 homes on a court or something, and you want to build some kind of recreational area,
Yeah,
as long as we're coming out ahead of what we would have seen if they were built as individual grassy yards and so forth.
I guess, and maybe it'd have to do some to find out, when I say required, I'm more saying I'd hate for them to come in with a plan of, hey, I have 2,000 units I want to do on this. It's a large scale development. We're going to do this. We're going to have specific grass areas, but then they're like, hey, we can't go above this size because then all of a sudden our impact fees are going to go up double whatever they were, right? They're going to increase the old impact fee versus the reduced impact fee. So they're limited to size, and then we get a bunch of useless grass fields. I'm not saying I see that. I'm just saying that's one thing that caught my eye is, are we making sure, because I would rather make sure we want to keep less water overall, and I think we're doing that in these developments, but I don't want to say, okay, well, now we're limiting these guys to a certain amount of square foot of grass, and then it becomes useless because they can't use it for anything as well.
Right, and there would still be the potential that you build a municipal scale park in that region that serves multiple neighborhoods, right? So that's still completely within reach. There's, what we scaled that around was what was in the water efficiency standards that were adopted the year before last, was described the minimum dimensions for an active recreation area as 30 by 50 or 1,500 square feet. And there was a benefit in being able to call something an active recreation area, right? Because it was not ornamental or non-functional grass anymore. I think when you have 30 homes and 3,000 square feet of grass, the likelihood that you're going to have more than a couple of households worth of kids down there playing at any one time is pretty unlikely. That a large number of people are there.
So you reckon more of like a pocket park kind of thing for a development?
Yeah, that's kind of what this is looking at, but it doesn't prohibit anybody from, planning a municipal scale park. This comes into play where you might have a gate and you're saying only our 30 households are allowed to come here. That comes into play. This is an exclusive area for your 30 households, right? It's a gated community. If it's a public park, then you'd probably look at what are our standards for a park that we would expect our entire city to be able to visit in this region. And that also has great efficiency. I mean, if we could get people to go a block or two to a large turf area instead of trying to create a place in their own backyard to throw a football, we'd save an enormous amount of water. Okay.
Good feedback. Jeremy?
Have you gone far enough down the road to know what the savings might be yet, or is this just conceptual at this point as far as the impact fee savings?
No, and Aaron's company is working on that still, and I bother him a lot about it. But as you know, Bowen Collins has a huge number of municipal projects going on. I think there's an expectation that these fees are that impact fees are probably going to go up at the district level. Sure. We hope we're seeing a 1/3 reduction in water demands, but impact fees are not completely linear. I mean, there's a base cost of connecting anybody to the system without regard to what their water use is. But I think the reduction in impact fees, even against the $13,500 that's the current impact fee, I think I could safely say it's going to be multiple thousands of dollars less per parcel.
Okay, and I think, appreciate the mayor for having you come so quickly, because it does matter a lot to our city as we're making our plans to make sure that we're in step, because to Councilman Coates' point, I think you're going to have developers that come in and they want to hit that. And if the city says, no, you're required to put in more amenity or park area or grass, then we want to be in step with the district. So we're not requiring more than what they're requiring, or the maximum they're allowing for their, we want to be water efficient and we want to help save them money both. So,
but also provide a place for the kids to play, because like you said, it's tighter density that we're seeing, and these kids need a place to play. I mean, the townhome unit next to us, we made them put in a lot of grass, and that place is full of kids right by my house.
That's great.
And
And that's what you want to see,
And
right?
I love it, right? That's what they should be doing. And there's no grass on any of the townhomes, but they have a park, it's a mini park, and they have a lot of grass right there, and it's great, because I think the kids all go down there, they have a place, and like you said, I call it a pocket park, just a small park that kids can go to and play, and then go back, and we don't have to have all these little ornamental lawns everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what you're saying is usable. I hear you both saying usable space, and so finding that right factor or that right balance.
Yeah, certainly.
Councilman Ivey.
So at this point, this is a voluntary program that you put a lot of work into to try to get ready for future contingencies. Would you talk about your recommendations and next steps? What that would look like? I understand that if things get worse, how would this evolve into an ordinance, or would it, or what would make that, ask the, municipalities to codify that? Would you just talk to that?
I don't think we have any desire to do that at this point, but one of the, we had a meeting with executive level of the Southern Utah Home Builders Association, and we got a pretty warm reception, right? But they're, of course, looking at the numbers. They wanted to meet with their board. They had a discussion. We'll meet with them again. So this is not only a voluntary program, it's a yet to be developed program. This is the framework that we've kind of created. We want to get more feedback from everyone. One thing that came up there, obviously we're in a drought situation right now. And when you're in drought, depending on what stage you're in, there could be a call at some point to start reviewing what are we building, right? Or what needs to be built, what doesn't need to be built, depending on how aggressive the drought becomes. This could become an option of a step that could be taken as an intermediary drought step, where you simply say, you know what, we do need housing. We have to have housing. It's a vital need, right? And you may say, but we've got to build housing that's more efficient. And so that's, to me, I think that's actually increasing our number of options should we find ourselves in some kind of a water shortage situation.
You know, the unique aspect of water in southern Utah is that this isn't a topic that some people doesn't believe in. I think across all ages and all varieties of people, everyone realizes that we need to do better with our water, because we do live in a desert and we have to act like it. The way our mayor always says, we totally agree with that. But as we work on those contingencies, I think it's very important that we keep in mind that, I don't know how to exactly say this. I think it's very important that we keep in mind that we're preparing now for the next generation. And sometimes in these cases, we have a tendency to have short-sightedness maybe, but I applaud this effort here. I think that it's important. It's good to have conversations, but we still need to work on critical infrastructure and things like that, and reuse pipeline, Lake Powell pipeline, all those things are going to be important as well as we cut back on our use. I think it's vitally important, as everyone would agree, that we need to continue to look for resource.
Oh, absolutely, yes. So we're pushing forward with our One Water strategy, which includes water recycling. It includes bringing additional sources in. We have a lot of new interconnections that'll be able to move water from different parts of the region or different reservoirs that we didn't have the opportunity before. So yeah, we're trying to create, we're very limited in the context of the Virgin River is the mother of all water supply here. And the Virgin River, if you look at the hydrograph, is one of the most erratic rivers in the western United States. And so having a very dynamic system that can capture those large flows when they're available and then meter them out, move them around, have different quality, different customers receiving different qualities of water. For example, agriculture does not need culinary grade water and so forth. All of that's in the plan that's being worked right now.
We're blessed with one aquifer, but it's only one.
That's right. That's right. It's one glass with 8 straws in it is how I often describe
That's right.
the region. So, any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doug. Okay, let's move to our last item. This is item 3. Also, Washington County Water Conservancy District Conservation Manager Doug Bennett on water shortage contingency and drought survey results. You've got just over 10 minutes. We've got a hard stop at 5:30.
Okay. So we've been working on a drought plan for quite some time, and all of the cities have a member on a drought task force. And this task force existed before I came to Washington County, and they've been working quite diligently on it. But drought issues are very hard issues because they're crisis issues potentially. You're trying to avert a crisis, and sometimes there are some very hard decisions that have to be made. So we thought it was important, and many of you should have gotten an email from me asking you to take a survey, and then I'm here to tell you what the survey results say. So we sought out input from elected officials, city managers, mayors, the board members of the water district, because this plan only works if everybody can buy into it. And we wanted to get everybody's opinion and try to put that into the plan. Who responded? We had more than half of the responses came from city council members in the 8 jurisdictions that collaborate with the water district. The technical advisory committee would include people like Lester would participate in that. So some of your technical officials running your water agency, mayors and city managers, and the trustees of the board of the water district. There are 5 drought stages. As a reminder, if you get to stage 4, it means you have failed in stage 1, 2, and 3. The goal of every stage is to try to avert the next stage if you can. But this is a supply and demand model. So we're looking at how much water people want, and we're trying to get them to change their demand. We're trying to keep as much reservoir storage as we can for as long as we can. The fraction, the variable we don't have any control over is supply. We can control the part of the supply that we're holding. We can't control Mother Nature's snowpack. We can't control the rainfall. We certainly, when it does rain, can remind people not to use water, right? And we've been doing that pretty effectively. So in the first part of the survey, you were asked, in what state of drought would you recommend initiating certain restrictions? And we rounded the responses down, but I'll explain more. So what you're seeing here are the proposed measures that came from the committee on the left side. And you see that the committee recommended most of these measures be implemented in some form in stage 2. Stage 2 is the deepest drought stage that we've ever reached in Washington County over the 50-year period of history that we looked at and ran our model against. We've never gone to stage 3 before. So stage 2 is pretty significant conditions over the course of most of our lifetimes, right? So stage 2 is significant, and something should be done in stage 2 to avoid moving into stage 3. So you can see the recommendations from the task force were largely in stage 2, and then you can see what the mean response was from the people who took the survey, and you can see that they agree, but then you can see some leaning toward 3 as you move down that chart. One that kind of befuddled me was the prohibition of mist cooling systems. Like, there were a lot of people that wanted to wait until we were in a pretty dire drought situation. And I look back on my childhood and my life, and I don't think I ever saw a mist cooling system till the 1990s. So somehow we managed, but surprisingly, people did not want to restrict them for some reason. And there honestly are not that many in Washington County. So yes, there's some good alignment here, and that's a good sign. What we were looking for is consensus. Where does everybody go? I did this in 2 phases. I started out with our technical group and our board members, and then we decided we'd go to city council members, mayors, and city managers. And you remember hand watering of plants and limiting building permits to critical facilities were all solidly in stage 3. But elected officials actually wanted to do some of those things in lower stages of drought. And I thought that was meaningful and worth pointing out. Then in section 2, we made a statement, and then we asked you whether you agree with it or disagree with it on a 10-point scale. So values under 5 where I disagree with this, values over 5 where I agree with this. And then I captured some comments that I thought captured the sentiment. So the statement was all cities should implement equivalent measures during drought, and most people responded 10. Yes, we should all do the same thing. Let's all pull together. We had a couple of outliers on the left side that would like for cities to be able to make their own plan and have their own policies. But they were a very, very small minority. So the 8.7 mean shows that we have a lot of consensus around the idea that we do this as a joint plan. These are some of the sentiment. Because I'm time limited, I'm not going to read it, or I probably won't even give you enough time to read it, but this information can be shared later. The next statement was economic impact and water savings should both be considered when choosing drought measures. So you have to weigh how much water savings am I getting and what impact is it to people's livelihoods, right? Who's going to be impacted? How does this affect our economy? And everybody generally agreed, yeah, we got to look at maybe something's a lot of water, but it's a good economic value and it should be protected. So just really what we were trying to capture there was sentiment about the role of economic impact. And most people agreed that, yes, we want to protect the economy as much as we can, but at some point having no water is an economic disaster. So we want to make sure that we understand that. A question about most of the cities have ordinances already. Those ordinances are rarely enforced in terms of a penalty. So this was to gauge the elected officials' propensity to actually go out and enforce those rules in a drought situation. And the statement is people should receive one courtesy notice that they're violating a drought rule, but then they should get a fee imposed if they don't heed the courtesy notice. And generally speaking, everybody was on the right side and said that, yes, this is a reasonable measure. There are some of the sentiments. Here's where we start to lose consensus. And this is one of the things, this was actually the statement that caused me to want to run this survey. In our drought task force, we said, parks are going to cut back. And I said, well, of course, we would cut back on decorative grass before we would start impacting the place where our kids play soccer and where people go to gather and where we have those recreational areas. And not everybody agreed. Some people thought, boy, if people see the park is green, but they had to dry up the lawn in front of the gas station, they may think that the city's not walking the talk. I think it's important that we get the citizens to realize that's not the city's park. The city maintains that park for you, the citizens. And so this is one area I think we need to go out and ask the public for their sentiment about some of this and see what their understanding of it is. But I feel like those are spaces that should be protected, that we still have a place to go if we're not watering our front lawns and things like that. So anyway, more work needs to be done there. It was on both sides of the dividing line. Golf course is another one. My experience even is that with a golf course, you've got professional staff there. It's a very large area, very large water user. The thing, in my opinion, to do with a golf course is you say, listen, I need you to use 20% less water. Figure it out, please. That would be my approach. Not everybody sees it that way. Some of them want them to be mandated that they can only water on certain days, or they can only become a 9-hole course instead of an 18-hole course or something. I've had very good success in my career with not prescribing everything to a golf course and telling them what I need them to do and letting them perform. But the responses were on both sides of that issue. So more work needs to be done there as well. There's some of the sentiment. And then this one was a little bit confusing, I think. So you see it's on both sides. The elected officials, the government officials said, of course a city should tell their constituents what we're doing. The technical people were like, you're going to make me fill out another report? What is this? So I think there was a misunderstanding of what we were looking for. One of the measures was simply to provide information and continue communicating with your constituency about what's going on, what is the city doing, make sure they know the city is taking action at the same time you're asking them to take action. So I think this one went on both directions simply because of a difference in perspective of what was being asked. And that captured it all right there. They said, we already turned in a ton of water data. The conclusions, the good thing is there's a lot of alignment between the elected officials that will be asking to adopt some of these measures. Cities aren't going to be required to adopt the district's drought plan, but we all know we'll go further if we go together. And everybody agrees that's going to be the strong approach to this. So there's very, very good support for a common plan. The golf course and public park requires more consensus. We should explore that more with the public, and there may be another survey that's available to the public. Measures with high economic we're wanting to be delayed until late stage, but with the understanding that if you wait too long, you crash the entire economy in a very severe drought or a multi-year drought. And then sentiment on city reporting suggests, yes, let's communicate, but let's try not to create extra work when we're already trying to manage what could be a crisis situation. Recommendations and next steps. So my committee meets again tomorrow, and we'll be using this information to hopefully come up with incremental steps. So you don't just go from 0 to 100 on some issue immediately, because it doesn't drop like an anvil. There would be some progress in each of those issues as the drought stage progressed, and you might have increasingly stringent measures around some of the stuff we saw on the first slide. We'll meet with the golf industry, get their ideas about how to deal with drought, and then we'll do something to survey the public, because I know as someone who serves constituents, you would love to know where are they on these issues so that you can represent them to your best ability. So we'll try to get more of that information for you. That's it. Any questions? Did I make it?
Fantastic. You made it. We have a few minutes. Council, feedback, questions for Doug. I think everyone would concur this is valuable information, a timely update. Council, what do you have for Mr. Bennett? Anything?
Can you watch your videos like of your meeting online? Is for tomorrow your meeting?
From the workshop I did, the online?
Well, your meeting tomorrow, again, you said?
Oh, no,
Is
that'll
available?
just be the technical
Okay.
committee. But this presentation was offered as like a webinar to people that took the survey. And we did record that. And I can send you a link to that recording if you want to see it, or if you want to share it with others. It basically goes through this slide deck, and it explains how the model works. It talks about snowpack. We talk in a lot more detail. But let me send you a link so you can watch that video if you wish.
Okay.
And then we'll be coming back. We'll definitely try to be at the district with a plan, hopefully in April. And you have representatives at the district, and they can keep you informed or invite me back to one of these meetings, whatever the pleasure of the council is.
What would you say are our stages now?
We know right now that if we were to have a plan and there had to be a declaration, we're in stage 1 right now. And we're in stage 1 mostly because we have a lot of reservoir supply. This is the worst snowpack in the history of record for the St. George region. So snowpack didn't get measured until the 70s. Nobody went up and collected data about how much snow was on the mountain until the 1970s. But we have precipitation data for the St. George region going back to 1893. And the record has holes in it where no data was collected and nobody knows what happened to it. But where those months had data in them, I did an analysis, and it was never this dry between October and the end of February in the history of record. So the snowpack's horrible, but we put a lot of water in our canteens, so to speak, right? But if we rely on those canteens too heavily, we draw down those reservoirs too severely, and we have another bad snowpack next year, that could push us into stage 3. You could go through 2 and 3. We could, over the course of this year, depending on rainfall and demand in the community, we could find ourselves in stage 2 later this year.
So one of the reasons why our Pioneer predecessors struggled is they didn't have reservoirs. So last year we had one of our best snowpacks ever on record, and we've been able to store that in reservoirs that our predecessors weren't able to take advantage of good years and save it for bad years. This is the perfect example. Last year was one of our best on record. This year's one of our worst, and hopefully we don't keep our worst going in succession for too long.
You think that a unified front is important. So let's have a good, really good, robust give and take between the district and the city so that we can address all the issues, because I know each municipality has different concerns. Geographically, they different positions, different situations. So that's what I would recommend, because I do believe the unified front helps everyone involved. So
thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Great job, council. Excellent presentation, great discussion, exactly how a workshop should happen. That is a wrap. I'll call for motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Councilman Coast, second by Councilman Bellison. All in favor? We are adjourned until 6 p.m. for our regular meeting. Thank you. Are in the City Council chamber at Washington City Hall for our regular meeting. You can watch our meetings live and also access them later for viewing at washingtoncity.org/meetings. We will start our meeting as usual with the help of the Interfaith Council. I'll invite my dear friend Rabbi Helene to come forward and introduce herself and start this meeting off the right way.
Oh,
Rabbi.
okay. Thank you so much. Shalom, I'm Rabbi Helene Einbinder from Beit Chavarim, Jewish community of Greater Zion. I'm a past president of the St. George Interfaith Council, and I am also a member of Utah's advisory committee to the United States Commissioners on Civil Rights. So as always, I thank you and the council, Mayor, for inviting all the people from the various faiths to deliver prayers or their thoughts. And just so you know, we pray for the government officials, our law enforcement, our fire department, people at the hospital that keep us healthy and safe, and of course our military and our veterans. So with that, I know the nature today and the high things that are going on and the dark times, especially anti-Semitism, is the rioting is just, I can't put into words what's happening. But hopefully we'll see some light. So I am going to deliver a prayer that I hope suits everybody, that we could see this better. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and raise up waiting to do your will. Give us a place to rest, Adonai, our God. Bring us into shelter in soft, long evening shadows of your truth. For you are true protection and safety, and in your presence are acceptance and gentle love. Watch over us as we go forth. Prepare us as we return. Ufros aleinu suchat shlomecha. Spread over us your shelter of peace, over all we love, over Jerusalem and yours. Baruch atah Adonai, hapros sukat shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim. Amen. And I don't know who's the secretary, so I usually get that. And
You got a promotion.
Thank you, Rabbi. We appreciate you. And thank you for all of your service. I've asked Councilman Craig Coates if he'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Council, before I call for a motion to approve the agenda as outlined, I will just make note that we do have need to go to closed session for a brief item, 10A, purchase, exchange, or lease of property. And I'll call for that motion.
So made, Mayor.
I have a motion by Councilman Ivy,
Second.
second by Councilwoman Casperson. All in favor? The agenda is approved unanimously. Next item, announcements. Monday, March 17th is St. Patrick's Day. Wear green. Saturday, March 22nd is the Interfaith Harmony Day concert and celebration. That will take place at Cousy Hall at the Catholic Church, downtown St. George at 6:30 p.m. Are there any other items that need to be announced? Seeing none, we'll move to the next item. Item 3, declarations of abstentions and conflicts. Anything to declare? Seeing none, we'll move to item 4, the consent agenda, consisting of the approval of minutes for the minutes from the City Council meeting of 2/26/25 and the Board Audit Report from February 2025. I'll call for a motion on the consent agenda. Call for a motion to approve the consent agenda unless there's discussion to be had on an item removed from the consent agenda.
Mayor, I have reviewed both the minutes and the board audit, and I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
You've heard the motion by Councilman Ivey. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I did have a couple of concerns, but I spoke with staff and addressed, but.
Thank you, Councilman. Appreciate your review of that, and that is entirely within your purview and role. The consent agenda is approved 4-1 for the record. Councilman Bellison, the dissenting vote, and is talking to staff. Item 5, this is a public hearing. 5A, public hearing and consideration to approve an ordinance amending the wastewater impact fee facilities plan and impact fee analysis. Public Works Director Lester Dalton, I'll invite you to come forward at this time. While I make note that this particular item was discussed in depth in our workshop meeting a few weeks ago. Lester, if you'll give us a brief briefing on that and field any questions, any lingering questions the council may have, then I'll open up the public hearing before we vote. Lester.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council. This is, like the mayor said, we discussed this in depth with the previous workshop session. The request is to adopt a new impact fee in the amount of $1,135. We have rounded that off a little bit from what was originally presented just because it makes everything easier and everybody likes a round number. We dropped the 42 cents off of the recommended maximum. We have not updated our impact fee since 2017, so this is long overdue. Bowen & Collins performed the analysis for us. It was based on the previously approved capital facilities plan. I've got Aaron Anderson here and a slideshow presented if we need to go through everything again, or if there's any questions I'm not able to answer for the council.
Councilman Coates.
Mayor, no, I'm ready to make a motion. We've had lots of discussion, and I think it's been a good plan.
I think we're there. Council, I'm happy for, Councilman Coates, happy for that motion.
As soon as the public hearing. Yep, we do.
You got me a little ahead there. I got a little
Sorry,
excited.
I was just saying I'm done with Lester.
I'm not done with you yet, Lester, but I'll catch.
Just right now. We'll be back.
Thank you.
Got a lot of pressure. We're trying to get this meeting. There's no hurry, but it's a short agenda, so we're kind of like horses going back to the barn tonight. You know, we're trotting quick. So as I was reminded by my good friend on the council here, this is a public hearing. Thank you, Councilman Belliston, and consideration to approve. So at this time, I will open the public hearing on item 5A, which is in regards to an ordinance amending the wastewater impact fee facilities plan and impact fee analysis. Anyone who would like to speak to this item, please come now and state your name for the record. We did not receive any online public comment on this item either. Seeing no one come forward, I will go ahead and close the public hearing and turn to Councilman Coates for a motion on this item.
Yeah, Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve an ordinance amending the wastewater impact fee facility plan and the impact fee analysis in the amount of $1,135.
You've heard the motion by Councilman Coates. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second by Councilman Bellison. Let's go roll call since this is an ordinance. Councilmember Belliston, Henderson,
Aye.
Coates,
Aye.
Ivy, Casperson. That is approved unanimously, 5-0. We'll move on to our next item on the agenda, ordinances. 6A is consideration to approve an ordinance for zone change Z-25-03 to update the existing PUDR located at 67 East, Prada Pecana Lane. The applicant is Craig Engel, and Community Development Director Drew Ellerman will present to the council on this item. Mr. Ellerman.
Thank you, Mayor. As stated, the applicant is requesting approval to add 2 units along with an alternative setback plan to the existing PUD residential property. The property is approximately 1.16 acres in size and is located at 67 East Prada Pecan Lane. The new units, 2 of them, are being proposed, and I'll kind of zoom in. And we'll be referring to these over here on the top left-hand part of the picture. The new building is labeled. That are being proposed in the northwest corner of the property. buying 1,733 square feet. Materials used on the exterior proposed buildings will be the same and/or very similar to the stucco and rock siding that is on the current 10 units that are existing now. The proposal also includes installing a 576 square foot canopy to the south of the existing playground area, and I'll kind of zoom in, which is this particular area that's the greenish blue color, and I'll give you a picture of that to upgrade the amenity area as part of the project. The surrounding zoning for this parcel is R16 to the northeast and south and west, and a small area of R3 to the east and R2 to the west. The general plan land use designation is medium-high density, which carries a 7 to 12 dwelling unit per acre ratio. Adding 2 units to this 1.16 acre property would create a total of 12 units. This would then put at the density ratio at 10.34 on this project, which is well within that density ratio. With the proposed units being 2-story, Washington City Code requires that building setbacks be 25 foot from a boundary line. The applicant is proposing this setback to be at 15 feet. Let me kind of come in. This will be the area we're talking about. The applicant is also proposing a for that 15 feet, which is required to be 25. Washington City Code also requires a distance between two-story buildings is to be 15 feet, and the applicant is proposing 10 feet between the existing building and the proposed new one. Washington City Code allows for the applicant to ask for an alternative setback request as part of a PUD. The applicant is proposing at this time that those 2 setbacks be reduced. Staff would like to note that if the proposed units were to be attached to the adjacent 2 units, being this one here, that there would not be a need that the applicant would meet all the standards within the PUD residential. So with that said, the Planning Commission reviewed this request at a public hearing last week at their March 5th, 2025 meeting and recommended denial by a vote of 3-1 for the proposed Z-25-03 with the zone change request adding 2 units and asking for an alternative setback plan, noting their concern would be setting a precedent in city code not being met and that motion of denial was sent on to you, the city council. The findings and conditions were part of their report. They are as part of yours as well. So I'll be more than glad to answer any questions the council might have on this proposal and about the denial from the Planning Commission.
Questions for Drew?
Drew, is the building that's to the right of the proposed, has already been built?
Yes, it is.
So what you're saying is make that like a 4-plex, then it would fit the setbacks because you wouldn't need the space in between?
Right, because taking that 10 feet over would then shift this 10-foot piece here to there to meet the 25.
Does the applicant own that building?
Yes.
Additional questions for staff? Councilman Henderson?
Yes, I'd kind of like to, in Planning Commission, they kind of alluded to a story about the tree, the tree that was there. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. What the, I don't know if your original site plan that you brought to the city was gonna, you're gonna tear the tree down at that point, or I'd just like to hear the story. I went, I walked your property, I saw the stump there, I'd like to hear a little bit more about the whole process, what happened with the tree, and if I could.
At this point, I'll go ahead and invite the applicant to come forward. If you'll just state your name for the record and then address the council members' questions, and I'm sure there'll be further question and discussion.
You bet. Good evening. My name's Craig Engel. I'm a longtime St. George resident. Been in St. George about 30 years. We've owned this property since 2009, I believe it was, that we purchased this property here in Washington. There is quite a bit of history with this property, so if you'll indulge me for just a minute, I'll go through it a bit. I know it's a short meeting, but it is relevant to why I'm requesting the setback amendment. In the financial downturn of 2009, we purchased this property. It was an improved 14-unit, two-story apartment complex. And we were going to build, I'm a framing contractor, or was a framing contractor, and that's my retirement. We put our savings into it so we could have the ability to retire. I currently get $1,600 a month from Social Security, so you're not living on that. So anyways, we purchased this property with the intent to build it as income property and have rental units. The downturn hit. I purchased it right at the exact right time, and the financing fell through. The mortgage company, the financing company went broke, and I had to sit on it. I got a job at Dixie University and waited it out. Finally got financing approved. It was like 5 or 6 years later. I can't remember. When I got the financing approved, I approached the city again. The city said, no, you can't build that project anymore because it's fallen into R16, and you would have to change the zoning. So I hired a guy from Rosenberg who was on the planning commission here, and we tried to get an R3 approved. Planning approved it, and then city council said they weren't going to approve it until they saw a PUD. So I had to go back at great expense, redraw something that was more to the liking of the public. There was quite a bit of public concern with this project when it was originally presented. So there was a lot of public problems. And also this tree was an issue. So that tree, I guess, was the oldest tree in Washington City at the time, and they needed that tree to remain intact. The original purchase, my original plan that I had purchased and was going to build didn't have that tree. The tree was mentioned in the minutes. I looked up the minutes, and it was discussed, and they decided that they didn't need the tree in the original. It wasn't me, it was Brad Alverson who did that. So the original purchase, when I purchased it, there was no tree. But when I went back to the city, because of all the problems that we had, I had to include the tree. In order to include that tree, I have to have a 35-foot space between the buildings, which is 10 feet more than is required by the city, which that 10 feet right now would do me a whole lot of good. So I don't know if you guys can recognize how helping the city is now detrimental to me.
Craig, where is the tree on the map? Is it in
So
the
it's
recreation
recreation
area?
area right there, right in front there.
And that's where there's 35 foot?
35 feet, correct, sir. So that, and then there was also at that time a frontage road that went through that corner up top there. So you couldn't put the 12 buildings in, but we were going to put one building on one side and one building on another side to get to 12 because we're trying to maximize our property for our retirement. But when MP11, I presented that to Drew a while back, it was a long time ago, and he said, hey, nothing's really going to happen until MP11 gets through. So once MP11 got through, he said you could do that, but MP11's got to get through. And when MP11 came, they decided they needed a big hunk of land on this side in order to make this road go through in the back. So that took away the ability to build one unit there. So once again, helping the city or the state or however you look at it is detrimental to me now because I'm being denied for this setback requirement in order to get 2 units. So that's kind of the long and short of it. Hopefully it's shorter than longer. I would like to say that we could put it as a 4-plex. I don't think it's the best use of the property. I think keeping it twin homes is much more appealing to residents and to anybody going by. We would prefer it. In order to build a 4-plex, I have to go in and demolish the demising wall in the existing building and turn it into a 2-hour because it's a 1-hour, which is really expensive. And very, very impactful to the residents that are there. I have to move them out and et cetera, et cetera. So it's hard for me to build that as a fourplex, but it can be done, and it would meet the setback requirements. The property that would be impacted by the setback, I have drawn, and I supplied to you and to Drew, a diagram of what its usability is. And there's very little functionality of that triangle piece to this side over here. Drew, is it possible to pull that up?
What side are you talking about?
That piece I emailed you today?
No, I didn't get anything in the mail today.
Drew, I can forward it to you, or
I'm planning to pull up a map anyway, so let me see if that map will work for the gentleman.
That triangle piece you're talking about is owned by the DOT, correct?
I'm sorry, sir?
That property's owned by the DOT, correct?
It is owned by UDOT right now. It is, yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
In that email, you showed that that Prada lane, that goes through that triangle piece.
It doesn't go through the triangle piece. We wanted them to put it through the triangle piece, but for whatever reason, they decided that they couldn't and had to put the road around back. And I did supply a drawing with setbacks that would show you what the usability of that little triangle piece there is. It's very little. There's really nothing you could do. And if you did build something, it would be so far down that the existing building wouldn't impact it. So I'm not really sure that if the intent of the city is to have setbacks that minimize impact from adjoining property, I don't think that this is relevant in that case. That's my opinion. And also that road that goes around back, that is not public access. Nobody can use that road. It's not accessible. So there's really no reason for that property to be purchased. I was planning on purchasing both the front and the back properties, both the side and the back properties, to try to build on them. But once I found out that road was not accessible by the public, there's just no reason to buy that property. The planning did say, hey, you know, if Don Johnson or somebody bought Johnson's property and turned it into, you know, a bigger piece, that it would be more usable. Sure, it'd be more usable, but your setbacks are still going to have to bring the building way down. They're not going to be up in that corner, so I'm still not impacting the adjoining people. They also said that they feel like, sorry, I just got to get my thoughts together here, a little nervous, that they felt like there shouldn't be a precedent. But why have amendments if there can't be precedents? If there's an owner that is being impacted by things that he did to help to the city, and then he's asking for an amendment so he can just get back to where he was, I mean, I don't understand why there's not that precedent. Why wouldn't that be a precedent? That would be the reason that you would have these amendments. So for me, I would just like you to consider there's no impact on the setback. I did a lot of rearranging of my property to meet the city's requirements and requests. And now I'm asking the city to help me out a little bit without impacting anybody and making the site actually a better project than putting a fourplex on there, adding another twin home. So that's my story. And I would be glad to answer questions.
Appreciate that information. I think you explained it very well. Councilman Ellison has questions, comments?
To be fair to the applicant, back in, you know, when this came through, when I was on the council the first time, there was the unknown of what's going to happen with MP11, and there was a proposed frontage road. It's actually shown on the map that you emailed over earlier today that kind of, you know, went on the corner of that property. And so that's why, you know, he wasn't, you know, partially why he wasn't allowed to build on that back corner over there. So I don't remember the tree discussion, but it looks like you're turning the tree into a fire pit. So I think that's kind of fitting.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But I personally, I don't see an issue with what he's proposing or requesting.
Councilman Henderson?
Sure. First of all, appreciate you working with the city on the tree, you know, I think that was a great idea to try to preserve that tree, but now it's
Thank you.
gone, and appreciate you working with the city and working with the, you know, I guess it's the DOT on that road, and I know that helped your neighbors over to the west to have, you know, an access road. So I feel like, you know, if there's any situation that probably deserves an adjustment for lot lines, I would say this is it. So I don't have a problem with it. I'm in favor of it, so.
Councilman
Mayor,
Coates?
may I just add,
Hold on
I
a
just want to
second.
add, because I have all the information that you need. You asked about the tree, and then but the tree was there, and again, it was the oldest tree at the time, it ended up dying, but they also is required in every PUD, you got to have amenity area, and this is where, you know, so that had to be put somewhere as well. It's not like there was a forcing being done, it's where the amenity ended up being, because they still have to have an amenity, period. You can't get out of that, whether it was the tree or not. And so I just wanted to make sure you understood all that information, that was part of it, but, you know, also there's another side to that as well, that it worked out best. They wanted to keep the tree, you had to put the amenity somewhere, that worked out, so it wasn't a massive sacrifice to the point that, hey, I have to have amenities, so here's where it worked out at.
Hey, Drew,
So-
do you remember the discussion that you said to me that wouldn't have passed without that tree being included?
That wasn't me, that's when the council at the time
You came to
wanted
me
it.
after.
Okay, hold on, Craig.
Okay.
Hold on
I'm
a
just telling you, the council
Thank you,
ended
Drew.
up-
That's
Yeah.
really good
Okay.
context. Love the institutional knowledge. Thank you. Councilman Coates?
Yeah, so I kind of have a question on the setbacks, because and it's more of the side adjacent to the existing building is supposed to be 15, but we show 10, and we have 15 instead of 25. In my mind, I'd rather push it closer to the property line because I'd rather keep the consistency of the distance between the buildings and keep it closer to the property line, because it's just fronting the interchange for the most part. I don't know,
Can you pull up the initial map?
15 between the three on the bottom.
Yeah, so I'm just saying, to keep it consistent with the building,
15
I'd
and
rather,
10,
I'd
swap.
rather you swap them and push it toward the property line if that's the route we're gonna go. And the reason why I say that is because then it would look consistent. And yeah, our rule is based on a boundary of the subdivision, but who knows, someday, maybe that triangle gets amended into this somehow, I don't know, I mean, and then you can address there. I'd rather just keep consistency from buildings and put it tighter on the edge, because other areas, we've had tight consistencies on those corners, and where it's the DOT and I remember I was on planning commission when the whole tree thing came through. Like, I've heard it all, I've seen it all, I've seen them go back and forth, so I'm not opposed to a different setback because I don't blame the planning commission for what they do, because they have to look at the rules and say, these are the rules, and then the council has the ability to amend the rules if it makes sense. And the way I look at it is, it's making sense in the fact of just what happened with milepost 11 or 12, whatever we're calling it.
Yeah. I mean, it was advertised 11, it ended up being 12, so
Yeah,
for the record.
So I'm just saying, if we're gonna push, pushing a little setback against a freeway is just not that big of a deal to me. And I understand the triangle piece is not a freeway, but it is the DOT's property. And I kind of look at it as, that's a good fit for the situation in my mind.
So I want you to respond to that.
Can I
Would you
add
like to
to
make your
his-
comments first? Yeah, go ahead, Councilman
I just want
Casperson.
to add to Councilman Coates' comment, because I watched the planning commission. I appreciate, how they investigate and ask a lot of questions. So I feel like I got a lot of information from that, and I appreciate what they do. And I'm in alignment with Coates with the given circumstance I would rather see it, with this situation, it seems like it makes sense that, this would be a good time to make an exception with, the history of this, and then also with UDOT having that piece of property and the triangle piece being, not a very usable piece of property. And so I just wanted to add to what you were saying.
I think I'd reciprocate that this isn't, I applaud the planning commission for doing the way they did, because they didn't want to set a precedent. I don't think we're setting a precedent.
And staff.
That we're setting a precedent in this because of the situation next to the interchange. It's not like you're doing this in a residential neighborhood. That's how I feel. So.
Councilman Ivey, and then I want your thoughts on this, Councilman Ivey.
Well, this is a unique situation. And I do agree with you. If there is a case where we can make an adjustment, this is the case, because there's no negative impact to the neighbor, and we want it uniform. And I don't want to get the cart in front of the horse, but I want to compliment you on the way you presented. We sit up here and we get to hear a lot of presentations, and I appreciate the way you've done that. You've been logical and reflective and helped us to see it. But for me personally, I don't see any negative impact to this. I could support this because the reason we have setbacks is to not negatively impact neighbors. I don't see that would happen. I'm also agree that maybe we could centralize the building within the setback property or boundaries that we have in place. But I'm also in favor of it.
Thank you, sir.
So, Mr. Engel, I think what I'm hearing the council say, and I want to get your feedback on this. So I think what the council's saying is they would prefer to maintain the 15-foot distance between the two units and push this property to the west, 10 foot from the property line. Get your feedback on that.
Yeah, I have no objection to that. And I would like to add that if it was zoned R3 and not PUD, that the 10-foot setback would be applicable. It
Good
would
point.
fall within the guidelines of an R3.
Okay.
So can I ask you, I'm not trying to make you go redo your plan. I just think it would look better, but it's not a deal killer for me. So
Yeah, I have no
I was
problem
just-
with it.
I was just thinking it might flow better with your project.
I
is
agree.
all.
I think it would be much better if we had 15 between the property, between the buildings.
Hold this thought for just a minute. If a motion came to move it 5 feet to the west. Thank you, Mr. Engel. It looks like council's ready for further discussion and or motion. Does staff have any feedback on this before we move forward?
If I may, without predicting the way the vote's going to go, the vote in affirmative would need to be voted as a permitted exception to current code. So even though you may not have a strong personal position, whatever the motion may be, please add as much specific as you can, because it would be what we call a permitted exception to current code.
Okay. Drew, did you have anything
The
else
only
you'd like
other
to
thing
add?
is the parking, because they're right smack dab on the minimum of it. Pushing that over there, we might have to take this particular parking area on the left, turn it to a single and make this a double. We'll have to make sure those get cleared up. Just on the parking would be the only thing, but
And if it doesn't work with the parking, then just leave it how it is.
Yeah, I like the idea of just allowing the applicant to choose what's best, because maybe he knows it better, but I think that we've got the parameters that kind of.
And the main reason why I brought it up is I didn't know before the meeting that he owned the property adjacent, so it kind of changed my mind about letting him. But if it was a different property owner, then it mattered to me more.
Councilman
Mayor,
Bellison and then Thad.
I have some historic Google Map imagery if Councilman Henderson wants to see a little bit of historical images of the tree.
Sorry.
I do think it is,
Here, everyone.
it is informative.
Councilman Henderson's body language tells us he's very interested in seeing this.
Climb over the wall.
This is an assignment I wanted, the shade tree, but he's been stingy with this, so I'm glad I could participate in some way.
One of these days, I'm going to let you arm wrestle, and I know who will win. Jeremy.
Oh, I'm old.
Mayor, while he's pulling that up, I just want to clarify. I think we've talked about it a little bit, but this is a situation where staff is not allowed to make that decision. I just want to clarify that. And I know that we've been in contact with Mr. Engel. He's emailed me and other staff members. This is not a situation where we have latitude. The only latitude is to come to this body and ask for a permitted exception. So it's been expressed, but this is the process. And even the Planning Commission doesn't have that ability. That is a council ability. So I think it was a correct call from both the staff and the Planning Commission to say it doesn't meet the setback rules, but the exception is to come to the council for a permitted exception. I just wanted to mention that while he's pulling up his tree picture.
So here we are in Google imagery of May of 2013. The tree is this green one here. Toggle through some of the historical imagery and you'll see where that tree ends up in relation to the buildings that get built. I don't know why you're laughing, Mayor.
I love the term
City Council
toggle through historical tree information.
A prior city council was very worried about this, such that the applicant remembers. So there you are, June 2015, same tree, no development activity there yet. That's June 2017, same tree. This is a winter picture. January, you'll see the same tree just out of leaf. And this is where you see the first two structures. The tree is located right there. And so it was located there between the two buildings.
So Thad, what happened to the tree? I mean, did it just,
You can guess, when you build those foundations and those parking lots on basically all four sides of the tree, it died.
so it probably
Yeah.
from the root structure or something?
Yeah, that's just a lot for a tree to survive. So there it is, again, in a little clearer image. That's in April of 2021. And then you'll see by April of 2023, it had passed away. So it might be a good indication for city councils not to, make tree conditions, but that was an important tree. It was a big, majestic, noticeable tree in the council.
What kind of tree was it?
Pecan tree.
Oh.
And it was located within the area that was designated for their recreational use. So it didn't require any additional spacing there because he needed to provide that anyway.
You could carve out that big stump and make a nice fire pit, right? There you go.
You have to go down to the Covington home to find pecans now. That big pecan tree in the backyard there. Council, is there further discussion? And Thad, do you have any additional legal counsel on the proper way to make this motion?
Nope. Ready?
I'm happy to entertain a motion if someone's prepared.
You make a motion.
Go ahead, Councilman.
Just real quick, Thad, do I need to say that it's a permitted exception?
Yes, I think the motion would be to allow a permitted exception.
Mayor, I would make a motion to approve an ordinance for zone change Z-25-03 to update the existing PUDR located at 67 East Prada Picanha Lane as a permitted exception, that we allow the additional 2-unit building with a either a 10-foot or a 15-foot setback between the two buildings or between the new building and the building that's currently sitting there.
Okay.
May I add to that motion, Councilman? So I would say the reason why for the permitted exception is because of the impacts that Milepost 12 had on the development, and the adjacent property was DOT owned.
Would you just state that as part of your motion?
Sure. Just say you state it. As it was stated by council.
You've heard the motion by Councilman Bellison with a little help from a friend. And you've heard the second by Councilman Coates. This is an ordinance, so we'll go roll call, starting with Councilmember Henderson.
Aye.
Coates.
Aye.
Ivy. Casperson.
Aye.
Belliston.
Aye.
The exception is permitted and the zone change is approved unanimously. Keep doing your part on building good product here in Washington. Rent it out to a young couple that's going to raise a family there.
Thank you for your
Okay.
consideration, gentlemen. Thank you, Drew.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night. Next item of business, 6B, this is consideration to approve an ordinance for zone change Z-25-04, moving from RA2 to RA1, located at 2191 East Washington Dam Road. The applicant is Sky Engineering. Community Development Director Drew Ellerman will present to the council on this item. Mr. Ellerman.
Thank you, Mayor. The applicant is requesting approval to change the zoning of approximately 8.3 acres. This is located at 2191 East Washington Dam Road. The requested change is from the current zoning of residential agricultural 2-acre to a proposed residential agricultural 1-acre minimum zoning designation. Lot 2 in the Kent Minor subdivision was illegally split into 2 lots, with the front lot not meeting the minimum 2-acre requirement. The RA1 zone change request will bring conformity to the lot size and designated zoning and allow the applicant to amend the current Kent Minor subdivision. This particular location has a general plan use designation of estate. The estate designation supports the RA1 zoning designation. The surrounding zoning of this parcel is open space to the north, residential agricultural 1 acre to the east, with the residential, single-family residential 30,000 square foot minimum to the south and residential agricultural half acre to the west. Staff has no concerns with this proposed zone change as outlined. The Planning Commission reviewed the request at their March 5th meeting last week and unanimously recommended approval of Z-25-04 for the zone change request from the RA2 to the proposed RA1 onto you, the City Council, and that's based on the findings below in your report. I'll be glad to answer any questions the council has on this proposed.
Thank you for your report. Council, questions for staff on this particular zone change request?
I think it makes perfect sense. If there's no questions, Mayor, I'm ready for motion.
Is applicant here? Do you want to say anything? Do you see my head shaking this way? I'm happy for a motion, council.
Yeah, don't mess it up now.
Motion, we approve the zone change Z-2504 RA2 to RA1.
Z-25.
Well, I'll have you start from the top, Councilman Ivy. Go ahead, Councilman Ivy.
A motion to approve an ordinance for zone change Z-25-04, which is RA2 to RA1 located at 2191 East Washington Dam Road.
You've heard the motion by Councilman Ivy. Is there a second? Have a motion by Councilwoman Casperson. We'll go roll call, starting with Councilmember Coates.
Aye.
Ivy. Casperson.
Aye.
Belliston. Henderson. That zone change request is approved unanimously, 5-0. Thank you for being here tonight. Moving along in our agenda, item 7, RAP tax. This is consideration to approve RAP tax requests for Washington City projects. City Manager Jeremy Redd.
Thank you, Mayor. Consistent with our past history, when we have RAP tax projects that we'd like you to consider, we bring it forward. There are 2 for consideration tonight. Again, we have, just as an update, we have $844,000 in available RAP funding after our last project, which was the remodel of the Heritage Hall. We do also expect to receive approximately $500,000 more before the end of the fiscal year in June. We're at around $800,000 to $900,000 per year in RAP tax funding. The 2 projects that have been requested or brought forward, number 1, an upgrade to the old museum, which is the front part of the new Heritage Hall upgrade. When we upgraded that hall, we put lighting, LED lighting in the soffit of the Heritage Hall. It looks really nice. And there's been a request to replace the soffit at the old museum or the old school so that it matches and has a similar look. If anyone's been through at night, you can see it doesn't have exterior lighting, and now our new gym does. So that the cost to replace the soffit and add the under eave lighting to match the upgrades to the gym is $40,290. And the second request, as we move forward to remove the old fire station, would be to pave the parking lot behind the city office. This would typically be used most often during large events, large city events such as Cotton Days, Veterans Day, those when we have the park completely full of residents. That creates more parking. And that would be done by our staff, our public works staff would pave that. We looked at some different options. We talked to you before about maybe a double chip seal, but that's not really an option. Nobody's doing that in town, and so it's more cost effective for our crews to just go ahead and pave that. It'd be a cost of about $35,000. So those 2 requests, the total would be $75,290.
Thank you, Jeremy. Questions for the City Manager?
Yeah, Jeremy. I guess I have concerns on removing the old fire station and then paving over it. I hate to see a facility be torn down if it can be utilized. So I have concerns with that. And then I do think it's a stretch using RAP tax fund to pave a parking lot, in just my opinion. So that's kind of my concerns. If we want to fund it a different way, if we feel it's needed, but I am concerned about tearing down a facility that could be used for storage or whatever else we decide to use it for. I definitely, an example is at the solid waste, they wanted to tear down the building, I wouldn't let them, and now we're repurposing it and making it a useful building for a lot less cost. So that's my concern about just demoing something that is a useful building.
As far as an answer, I would just say that Thad could give us more of the history of that building, maybe the trees outside of it. But as long as I've been here, it's been used as a storage building. It's stored parade floats, some parks equipment. Most of the park storage has now been moved. Well, all of it's been moved now up to the new parks building and other facilities up there. So the only thing I could see it used for, we had a request a couple of years ago to do something with it, but we looked into the cost of upgrading that building for public use, and it really was cost prohibitive because of its age and the condition. So really, the only thing that we could possibly use it for is storage. That was when the decision was made that probably the best decision would be to take down the building. But really, again, that's the call of this group. Whatever you want.
Do you have other places that you could store, what was in there before? Like, I know you said you had a lot of the parks equipment moved from there, but what is in there? What is it being used currently right now for?
So right now, there's nothing in it today. When we remodeled the old gym, we used it to store equipment and materials while they remodeled the gym. We didn't have any space. There was nowhere outside of the gym to keep all that. So that's what it's been used for. Right now, it's clear and clean. Everything's been removed today.
We potentially have in the future, not this coming year, but some buildings we have to remodel right next to it that we might have to use again for storage. I don't know, I'm just hesitant. My biggest concern is just, I think it's a stretch using it for RAP tax funds. I don't want to use RAP tax funds to pave a parking lot unless it's attached to I feel like we have enough parking for the park that's there, but I have a hard time with using it for paving a parking lot. And on the other thing, on the museum, I kind of feel like maybe we hit it at a later date and not today, but that's kind of my thoughts, just because if I don't want to touch something and then it's like ripping off the Band-Aid, but not fully ripping it off, and then you keep going back to it if we don't. So that's my two concerns.
So with the old school or the museum, would that bid also include cleaning up the surface conduits that have been run out of necessity because, for electrical needs and things like that as well?
There's not a lot left. We cleaned up a lot of it but there are a few conduits left underneath the soffit, and that electric wire would be moved inside or under the soffit as they replaced it.
Any type of data to show what the parking needs would be for veterans on like 4th of July or Cotton Days? Was that kind of the idea that we needed the parking for?
That's the concept. I don't know that we've done any data, but right now we ask the church if we can use the parcel across the street, the old Nyson store, and it's fairly full during those big events. So as we're contemplating redoing our downtown, that was part of it. When we originally had the agreement with the church, paving that or at least double chip sealing it was part of the agreement that we had with them. Of course, when they didn't need to use it, we were no longer required, but that's where this concept came from, that we would pave that additional gravel area.
Your opinion then, at some point, we would need that to be a parking lot. If it doesn't, we don't need it right this minute, then we would at some point.
So ask where the 35,000 number came from?
That's what our public works told me they could do it for, as far as buying the asphalt.
So they're saying they'd prep it and they'd asphalt it and
all the work, yeah. We're not billing ourselves for that. We would do it ourselves, but am I correct in that assumption? That's the cost of the asphalt. Yeah. Yeah, removing the fire station, the only cost there is the cost that we would have to pay the solid waste district to dump the material. So we are doing it, we were doing the most cost-effective way possible. We received a bid, we put this out to bid, and it was $40,000 just to take down the fire station if we have a contractor come do it. And with this, we feel like we can get the paving and the fire station done using our staff for $35,000.
So I don't disagree with the logic behind Councilman Coates' comment there in regards to the old fire station. It's just that if you look at the condition of that building, I mean, I don't even know how much it would cost just to get the roof. I mean, the roof is missing shingles, it's blighted, it's worn, but I mean, sometimes there's a beneficial use, but I think as we take it in the context of trying to improve what in some areas appears to be a blighted downtown and kind of vitalize and redesign what that best use is going to be. I don't think that long-term that fire station really fits what our vision is for that downtown, but from a practical standpoint, I'm all about that. I mean, if we didn't have the new Parks building with the storage and stuff in there, I would really share even more deeper your sentiment there. Councilman
I
Belson,
don't
you have some comment?
necessarily disagree. For me, I kind of look at it and see, is that a RAP fund or is that
That's
a
more a
fund type
question.
of a thing? I think my attitude is when it comes to RAP funds, it ought to be, the public ought to be able to see, feel, and touch it, right? So.
Let me speak legally versus, legally it
Well,
matters.
legally, perfectly entitled to do it.
Make sure that's clear. Like,
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't think anybody's going to come and say that's not an acceptable use of the RAP fund legally. But your question, and I think Councilman Coates' question is this something we should do? I just want to make sure that clarification exists.
I just think when it comes to RAP, this isn't an additional tax that's placed on people for things that fall in line with that. And I parking, I don't know. I kind of struggle.
Mayor, may I?
Councilman Henderson, yes.
So I'm okay with all of these. I like the idea of kind of finishing up the exterior of the old school because we did the regrouting or the remortaring and stuff. And I think, as Councilman Ivy said, some of that old conduit up there just looks horrible, and I'd love to get it cleaned up. And I think that's a good use for RAP tax fund. I'm okay with, I'd love to see the pavement done, and I agree with Councilman Coates. As far as typically, I would not want to tear an old building down, but I think it's time for that one to go down. But I do agree that I'm not sure I'm comfortable with RAP tax on the paving. Is there another place we could pull funds from to get that pavement done? And
Is there? Yes.
okay.
Now, if Blake was standing up here, he'd tell me it's not a real good use of city streets funds either. So we don't want to use money that would go to repair roads. We can, again, but it's tough to find $35,000 somewhere to do a project like this. It has to come out of some fund, and I just don't know where the right place is. That's why I felt like the RAP tax was probably the lot to ask for it, but we don't have $35,000 in any other fund that I can think of that wouldn't decrease something else we could do, some other project we could do. This does as well, but it does fit under RAP taxes.
Can I share a different perspective? Because when I went to the State of the City, there was so many cars parked, on the other side of the road. And so I feel like, there's going to be a lot of events, city events, that we have, that it could provide a place for people to park there. And so I don't really have an issue with using RAP tax funding because we'll be using it in a way that a lot of our citizens will be using. And it'll be, if there's a lot of people parking across that street, we're going to be using those, I don't even know what you call that parking area, or that, what is that area?
The Nisons.
Yeah, the Nisons. So I think it would be safer to have families park on this side of the street rather than having to cross that road, especially as it's gotten busier. And so, I feel like we're getting that paved for, our residents to be able to park, to be able to come to the different city events and activities that take place at the city. And I don't also see an issue with, removing the old fire station where there's really not a, beneficial use to it. And so I'm supportive of all these.
You're kind of looking at it as additional parking for the park and for the
Yeah.
and stuff. I can see that too.
The fire station has served our city well. It was built kind of in our city's first growth spurt, and I appreciate our council members' comments. We come from opinions that are all important and they all need to be voiced. Where I'm at is, I think that the the firehouse has served us well, but to fulfill kind of the destiny of what we'd like to see for our downtown, and considering people walking across Main Street for parking, it's not completely safe to do so, especially, you know, with the off-ramp now. I'm supportive of removing the firehouse, and the way that I look at the RAP funds is that if it's recreation, arts, and parks, then you've got to be, it's implied that that people should be able to access those amenities. And so I'm okay with using RAP, but I do understand and I appreciate the concerns and the comments that have been made, but I'm okay with using RAP in this case for this parking lot, because I would hate to short sight our roads because of this. I think that we're better served to leave money in our streets funds and use RAP that is a stable income, and that we're drawing, I think I figured it's like 70,000 a month from that, and I think that's probably a pretty good use for that. So anyway, that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Councilman Colts.
So Mayor, Jeremy, have we decided, I understand that we were looking to just change order in the light fixtures, or I mean, the new lighting, but have we entertained getting additional bids? Because sometimes I know change orders can be a lot more expensive than when you get a direct bid for something. So have we explored that option?
We haven't. They asked the subcontractor that did all electrical work on the gym to give them a price to do that part as well. So it's not, I don't think it's any more expensive, and we would get the same lights and the exact same product as we had on the old gym, but we haven't gone out and requested multiple bids. It would be a change order to our.
So one of my fears is, and again, it might be in range, it might not, right? I mean, it seems a little high to me for some soffit and some lighting, but I don't know those costs that well, so I can't say I do. But where are we gonna stop with the school? Like, or is it, I just, you know, I feel something's coming in the air, and I feel like we gotta tighten our belts on what we are spending money on and what we're not. Just, we've had some additional funds. I felt like this when COVID hit, and then COVID changed everything, and it was crazy how much money we had to use, and we had to use it within 5 years. But I feel something in there is changing, and I feel like we gotta be more strategic on what we spend our RAP tax funds on to give the best bang for the buck for the residents. Is this it? I don't know. But what's great about this is we can all have a different opinion. Might disagree about how we spend the money, but ultimately, it's all for the good of the residents. So I struggle with the parking lot. I feel like, I hate pulling our public works away to do projects to save us a few dollars when they have so many other things to do, but I'm glad they're willing to do it. I just hope they do it on their time schedule within the year, not just has to be done immediately if that's the case. So we can find a window for them if that's the direction we go. And then as far as the soffits, is that it? Are we done? Or does it get all of a sudden in 6 months, we're gonna say, well, we gotta do this, and then we gotta do this, and when are we cutting off the bleeding of the money on that facility? I feel like we've put a lot of money into it, and I'm glad we did. I just feel like we gotta stop at some point on that facility, so.
It starts to feel like when your wife remodels the kitchen and
I haven't had
bathroom looks bad, then the living room looks bad.
that experience.
Have her talk to Lynette. They'll have a great conversation. You deserve that experience.
I don't want that experience because I can, I like my day job. So.
If I'm gonna take your analogy or my analogy of the house, I mean, we're getting ready to remodel the whole house downtown. So we are getting ready to do a much larger project, but
we're not. We might have design, we're not putting the money up. We've already put our money up to acquire the land. That's what I'm trying to get at. Where do we stop and let the next person take it on and be partners? That's where I'm saying. So that's why I'm having concerns with these and the fire station, the old fire station, right? If it's served its life, it's served its life. I just hate to take it down premature if we have a use for it and then put down pavement that's gonna rot that gets used 3 times a year. Like on parades.
I would say that the pavement where the fire station sits will get used a lot more because it's closest to the park, to the old gym. If that helps at all. That piece will get used more than others.
I mentioned something else.
Go ahead, Councilman.
So I think the Historical Society kind of caught that same vision as well. You know, they've done some nice improvements to the inside of the museum. They were there yesterday in their era-relevant clothing and have painted the entry and done some nice improvements and made a concerted effort to clean the inside of the museum and make it really presentable and streamlined. And, you know, we appreciate them and their efforts and their support. So, you know, I know that they're kind of excited about the use of that space, that of course continued use of their space, and they do a great job.
Councilman Belliston, did you have any further comments?
Honestly, for me, I have less concern with the old fire station because I agree with Jeremy that would get used. It's the rest of that lot that, I don't know, that's all I got to say.
Council, I'm happy to entertain further discussion on this item and/or motion.
Mayor, do you want to see some historical imagery?
Thad, do you have can you take us through the trees?
And it influence any vote on this, but I do think the city council will find the historical imagery interesting if IT can help me make sure I'm allowed to connect. No, I'm not joking. This is June of 1993. This building here is the old city hall.
Is it black and white in 93? We didn't have.
Well, this is sobering. In 93, aerial imagery was pretty rough. It feels kind of like the old Western movies, yeah. And this is the fire station. Now at that time, so I was a youngster in the decade of this, and I remember that it was much like the fire station in Vail is today. There would be a loud siren that would ring at noon every day to let you know what time it was. And the building was not what our current fire stations are. It's really just a bay or two for a fire truck. And if there was a fire emergency, and nobody was staffed there per se, but if an emergency occurred, folks would get the call and they'd all rush there, park somewhere, jump in the fire truck and respond to the emergency. And so, you know, to call it a fire station, it's a much smaller facility than anything we build for our fire department these days, because we house multiple different vehicles and apparatus and officing and a number of things and so this one's a much smaller building than that. You'll see here that's 98. You'll notice a new city council building, a main city hall. So between 93 and 98, the old one left and the new one came, and the fire station's still standing. I believe in 98 it was still being used by the fire department as well. I think in 03, those might be power trucks or one of the other department's trucks, maybe Parks trucks, but I think by then it had been converted to different use. You'll see it there as the city's changing. You'll notice the police station is not there yet. It's just an empty lot up there. There's the fire station there. You know, we've made good use of it despite it not being a fire station for a few decades. Here's the old city community garden, if you remember that.
Community gardens.
And here's the most modern view, you know, police station, city hall, and that station there. And so there's no question that everything around it has come a long way since it's been done being used. And it really isn't a huge facility per se. It's mostly one that's got a little bit of historic memory to it. Thank you, Mayor.
You're gonna have to teach me how to do historic imagery.
I really appreciate these
Like a
presentations.
training on that next.
Yes. I'll make a motion to approve the RAP task request for Washington City projects for the amount of $75,290.
I have a motion by Councilwoman Casperson. Is there a second?
And that.
A second by Councilman Henderson. We'll go roll call on this, starting with Councilmember Ivy. Casperson.
Aye.
Belliston. Henderson. Coates.
Nay.
And the RAP tax requests are approved on a vote of 3-2. And I just thank you, council. It's good discussion, good healthy discussion. We'll move along to item number 8, which is report of officers from assigned committees. Start with Councilman Belliston. Councilman Henderson.
I don't have anything.
Councilman Coates.
Well, we had flood control a couple weeks ago, but it was pretty boilerplate. Yeah.
You want to talk about our work session in 2 weeks?
Oh, yeah. So on the Washington County solid waste, the next work session will, Mayor, we're going to do it
Yeah.
at 4 o'clock out there.
Yes, on-site visit.
Just do a quick little tour of the new administration building and the scale house. They're not quite open. The plan was April 1st to open, but we're working through some issues out there to get the project finished up. And so I'd like to get a quick tour with you guys and get you to check it out. And
That'll be on the 26th. We'll do on-site work session.
they're not big buildings, but I think you'll like the facility, and it's going to be way nice once they get up and running for everybody. So
I drive past it quite a bit. It looks great.
I'm super excited for it, and then kind of explain the next phase and the approach, and I'll have more details. I'm working with staff right now to understand. I think we're going to try to do some different type of funding than we were proposing since the CIB funding didn't work out. We're also working at some cost cuttings. I'm in there with my hatchet right now, so I'm doing a doge myself, just making sure that we're so that's, as you can see, I'm on that mode, so that's how I voted tonight on our own stuff, so.
Well, you're doing a great job out there.
So,
Keep up the good work.
I don't really have anything to report on Power Board. I did attend that one by Zoom, but then I was able to get in at the end. I just want to appreciate Dick Saunders. I know he's had some health things and he's not here, but I know Mayor was able to present him with a little appreciation that night. And so we just hope the best for Dick and Lori, and we appreciate his service on the Power Board.
And I know how close you guys are. Thank you, Councilman.
Yeah, I appreciate Councilman Coates mentioning Dick. He's a great friend to our city, and our hearts go out to him.
Councilman Ivey.
The legislative session ended at midnight last Friday evening. I just want to give a brief rundown on some of the things that I felt were important that we tracked the city and made some really good effort on. First is HB 300. This ends universal vote by mail and would require in-person using your four-digit voting code. And 267, this one, the day that we were at the Capitol with the Youth Council, the mayor and his staff came out and they said, we just received just under 1,000 emails that morning regarding the collective bargaining.
Or the governor.
The governor. What did I say? I'm sorry.
You said governor.
I'm sorry, the governor, yeah. I apologize. BAR's collective bargaining with public sector labor unions. That was a big deal there. And then Walters, this doesn't affect directly what we do on city council, but I don't know if you have council members have ever had someone reach out in an HOA with frustrations that they can't get relief from their HOA board or their president. They feel like there's some injustices. Well, they're working with Representative Walters. He passed HB 217, which is Homeowner Association Amendments. And what this did is create an office in the state ombudsman's office to hear complaints about HOAs. And for $150, you can get an opinion that in some cases can be used in court proceedings. And I'm sure that if you haven't lived in an HOA, you probably had people that are frustrated. I think this is a great bill to help answer some questions that they might have. HB 77 banned almost all flags and banners from being displayed on or in public buildings. What would be allowed would be the U.S. flags, state flags, the military, Olympic, college or university, and of course, if you have a city flag. That was a big bill, and again, that's flags and banners. And Utah became the first state to pass legislation requiring apps to verify the user's ages. This is a big step in the right direction, I think, and if signed, that will go into effect on May 7th. And then two of our local Representative Walter and Senator Vickers, sponsored HB 256. This was the what we would call its municipal and zoning amendments. And it was the one that dealt with overnight rentals, being able to use the list of compliance. If we had another concern, then we could use the list to verify.
Is that the one that Jordan shared with us tonight,
Jordan
Councilor?
shared it earlier tonight, did a great job doing that. SB 67, this is the local option sales tax amendment. It literally ran out of gas with 30 seconds. If we'd had 30 more seconds, we'd got this passed. This was the option where we could pass a local sales tax to help pay for fire, police, fire, publics like that. And it was hand-delivered to the Senate, and Senator Ipsen was on his feet trying to get the speaker's attention and trying to get it done. And the speaker got out the words that he was going to add it to the concurrence calendar and then vote on it, and we literally ran out of time. But he did a great job trying to get it passed. It's just a flood of bills there at the end. It didn't quite get through. The bill that I mentioned to you 2 weeks ago, the SB 337, that prompted a special session from the league about concerns over economic development and the state essentially having broad land use taxing planning authority to the state, as well as keeping the revenue from them. That would develop a new agency in the state entitled the Beehive Development Agency. This was turned back, and I'm sure it's going to come back again, but we'll watch that during the interim sessions, because we like the idea of having the state as a partner, right, Rusty? We'd like to have a partner in the state in dealing with big economic development projects, but we don't want to be preempted from them. We feel like that we need to have that firsthand approach and then benefit from the revenue that's created so that we can continue to grow here. Our good friend in Cedar City, Representative Shipp, passed HB 58 that allows for firearm safety in schools, where if a parent did not want their kids to have the firearm safety, they could opt out. But it was solely meant to just create a safer environment for kids that might stumble across a gun or guns being left out. And so that passed, and I feel like that'll be good for our school kids in the state. HB 456 is a transient room tax, modifies acceptable uses of TRT, and also allows the county to enter into a local agreement to share the revenue for EMS. So that'll be good for us. And then the last thing I'd say, Mayor, is there were significant reforms, including changes to the state's election system. And for a fifth consecutive year, income tax was cut for 5 years in a row. The state now has a $30 billion budget. And lawmakers address public transparency, accountability, and judicial reforms. They passed 582 bills, and Governor Cox has until March 27th to veto them. So that's all, Mayor. It was fast and furious, but I appreciate Jordan. We all know what a great job he does, and our lobbyist at the Capitol, he does a great job, and we're well represented. It's a necessary effort. So,
you know, I don't particularly love the legislative session, I gotta be honest with you. It comes too fast and there's too much going on, and I can never even remember what the letters and numbers are of the bill. But I can tell you one thing that I appreciate is the fact that Washington City is involved. They've, with Councilman Ivey, Jordan, and Eric on the Hill, we have built genuine relationships, not only with grassroots bills starting here locally, often from residents in our own community, with our local representatives taking those through, and also when there's pushback from what some might say, state being overreaching a little bit, we were able to push back. And so what I think I've learned more this year than ever is just the value of influence and relationships. And I think that starts early. I mean, we meet with our legislators on the front end of those things. They take our feedback, we have their contact, and then after the session, I think it's healthy again for them to come and maybe give a reporting back to us too. So, and we appreciate the collective work there. I know that's a lot of work during the first, couple of months of the year, and appreciate the influence we have on the Capitol Hill there. Councilman Casperson. I just have a couple pictures. Steve, could you pull those pictures I texted you? So this is on my way to work this morning, driving on George Washington Boulevard. This is that little remnant piece for the George Washington Plaza. And I talked to Barry earlier today, and I said, man, I just start realizing how soon April 21st at 6 p.m. is to have this project done with the statue placed. Steve, could you just kind of pan through those pictures for the benefit? Hang on to that one for a minute, for the benefit of the council and then staff that's here. But you can see the pedestal there, the concrete cylinder there where George Washington statue will be. You can see the beams are placed, those metal beams in the back for the pillars. Go ahead and keep scrolling through there, Steve. The sidewalk was just being poured this morning, wet concrete. You can see there's 3 or 4 sections of pavers there. It's going to be really nice because not only does it honor American history, but it also has what I would call some areas for blank canvas to tell our local farming, our local story, especially as those farm fields turn into subdivisions. I think it's important that we have this area to be able to, kind of showcase that. And it won't all be done, but we've got enough funding for enough to get the ribbon cut. Go ahead to that next slide, Steve. Concrete drying, one more, go again. I thought that's kind of a pretty view from that area. It kind of parallels, and you can see it's kind of a triangular piece. And the next slide, and that might be the last one there. But it's coming along really nicely. John Costanza has done a great job with the design. I appreciate the feedback from the council on this. When Barry and those guys presented, and Paul and those guys presented on this, they took your feedback, they incorporated that. We're going to have a few little fundraising things within the community with some bricks and pavers that people can buy to add to it. And so we're trying to do it on a shoestring budget. And I haven't followed back up with Jordan to see if the county allocated a little more TRT funds yet, but we're waiting to hear back on that. But it's a really nice project. And so that's kind of my update for you tonight, is that the George Washington Plaza is coming along, and it will be ready to go for a big celebration to kick off Cotton Days and to also celebrate America's 250th anniversary with a plaza and statue of our founding father, George Washington. Next item of business is the city manager report. Jeremy.
Thank you. That was really exciting how you said that. I told you all last week, I reminded you about the Parks and Rec conference and the fireworks. And then last night when my dog was going nuts, I was like, who is doing fireworks? I mean, that's how long my memory lasts. We did give our fire department a little bit of work last night, which was kind of exciting. We caught some weeds on fire. So if you hear about that, that's what happened. I would like to commend Brian. He's out for spring break this week, but did a heck of a job getting the initial budget ready and give you a really early look at what we're thinking. So if any of you have any questions on that, he or I or both of us would be more than happy to meet with you. And that's my report, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Next item is closed session. We do have a need to go briefly into closed section for item 10A, which is purchase, exchange, or lease of property. So I will call for a motion to move into closed session.
So made, Mayor.
Have a motion by Councilman Ivey, a second by Councilman Coates. All in favor? Any opposed? That is approved unanimously. We'll go directly into closed session.